In the ruthless empire of Actilus, the path to the throne is paved with blood. The monarch ensures the survival of the strongest by producing numerous heirs, only for them to turn against one another in a deadly contest of succession. The rules are simple: kill or be killed. To claim the crown, one must eliminate all rivals. Only the last one standing shall inherit the empire. Amid this merciless tradition, one child emerged victorious, a boy of only 13. While his elder siblings schemed and fought, he struck them down one by one. With calculated precision, he ensured that no other heir remained. His final act was both terrifying and grotesque, binding together the hair of his decapitated siblings and presenting their heads before his father, the emperor. And the emperor? He was pleased. A man of cold pragmatism, he admired the ruthless efficiency of his youngest son. The throne, he believed, would finally have a ruler worthy of its power. But as the emperor moved to announce his new heir, a dagger pierced his chest. Blood spilled. The father's eyes widened in disbelief. Before him stood his son, his lips curled into an innocent smile, his crimson eyes gleaming with amusement. Waiting would be boring. With those chilling words, the young prince seized the throne. Raniello Actilus. And today, he stands before the altar. A wedding. The grand cathedral is bathed in golden light, banners draped in royal red, swaying gently in the breeze. The air is thick with the scent of fresh roses, yet beneath the beauty lies an unshakable tension. She stands beside him, the emperor of Actilus, trapped and sold in a marriage with a tyrant emperor. Her hands tremble as the officiant speaks, the weight of the ring in her fingers suddenly unbearable. If I drop this now, will my head still be attached to my body by the end of this? She gulps, fingers tightening around the delicate band. Raniello watches with the same unsettling amusement. This is entertainment for him. A game. She slides the ring onto his finger, and in return he does the same, deliberate, precise, as if placing a shackle around her fate. You may now kiss the bride. Her heart stops. Time stretches unbearably. She braces herself, every nerve in her body on edge. Yet, nothing. Silence. Why isn't he moving? Daring to peek, she lifts her lashes. Is he going to skip it? Confusion flickers in her green eyes as she glances up at him. Raniello Actilus, the monster of the empire, the emperor who carved his way to the throne. Yet, standing before her, bathed in golden light, surrounded by soft petals and grandeur, he is impossibly breathtaking. His smile is serene, almost too gentle for a man with blood-stained hands. She stiffens as he leans in. If you'd waited 5 more seconds to open your eyes, he muses, voice languid, I would have gotten really bored. Before she can process it, he kisses her. Her thoughts echo as their kiss deepened. This is a world inside a novel she knows all too well. And she is not herself anymore. She just happened to possess a bride headed down the aisle to marry this tyrant emperor. The novel, titled The Flower That Blooms Even in the Abyss, tells the tragic tale of Emperor Raniello. He was known for his relentless conquests and destruction. During one of these campaigns, he encountered Saintess Seraphina. Fascinated and twistedly captivated by her, Raniello abducted her from the temple, determined to claim her as his own. Yet, Seraphina never succumbed to his darkness. Instead, her purity only grew, shining even more brightly. The more she resisted, the more obsessed Raniello became. His desire to tarnish her innocence turned into an insatiable madness. Consumed by jealousy and paranoia, Raniello murdered Seraphina's first love, Eden, a holy knight who had vowed to protect her. This final act of cruelty broke Seraphina's resolve, and in her grief and fury, she turned against the emperor. Her wrath led to Raniello's downfall, and in the end, he was executed. The reincarnated protagonist, however, does not find herself in Seraphina's role, but instead as a minor character. The Empress, an insignificant figure in the novel, who is only known for being swiftly killed by the emperor. The empire follows strict monogamous rules, and since divorce is impossible, the only way to take a new bride was to kill the old one. The Empress's name is never even mentioned in the novel, a character whose sole purpose was to die. She clenched her fists. If she had arrived in this world before the wedding, she could have run, faked her death. But now, she was already here, already married to the monster who would kill her. What could she do? The thought alone sent shivers down her spine. Tame Raniello? The man who burned cities to the ground, who slaughtered armies for amusement? She nearly gagged. No way. Survival required something else, something clever, something unexpected. She recalls how the Empress's attempts to question Raniello's cold demeanor only made her more noticeable, sealing her fate. Determined to avoid the same mistake, she resolves to remain invisible. The plan crystallizes. On the day Raniello leaves for the temple, the protagonist will fake their own death. She reasoned that Raniello, consumed by his obsession with the Saintess, won't bother to verify the Empress's demise. This calculated move offers a glimmer of hope, a chance to escape the tragic end written for the Empress. Just as she starts to believe that survival might be easier than anticipated, a sudden encounter shatters her illusion of anonymity. Standing before her is someone who refuses to be ignored. He smirked. "Are you ignoring me, Empress?" Her breath hitched. No, she wouldn't dare. But words failed her as she struggled to find an excuse. A misstep. Her foot slipped. She tumbled gracelessly to the floor. This was humiliating, but maybe it would buy her time. Maybe if she played weak and pathetic, he'd lose interest. Instead, laughter. A slow, entertained chuckle from the man. He stepped closer. "I will give you a chance to explain." Her mind raced. Think. I have a chronic illness, Your Majesty," she blurted. It makes it hard for me to speak in front of you." Raniello raised a brow. He had never heard of such a thing when he received the proposal. She thought hard, scrambling for another excuse. "It doesn't happen that often. And besides, it's possible because of his strong aura." He chuckled, leaning closer. "Oh? So according to you, it's my fault?" She knelt down immediately, fear gripping her. One wrong move, and he might get rid of me right now. She tried to coax him with more excuses, her voice careful, measured. Raniello's eyes gleamed with amusement. "Will you always avoid looking at my face for the rest of your life?" She knew she had to answer fast before he got bored. Not wanting to displease him, she hesitantly looked up, only to find him right in front of her, knelt down as well. He smirked. "At least you're entertaining, so I'm glad I chose you." Raniello raised his hand, lightly caressing her lips. "Smart," he murmured, praising her for knowing exactly when to back off before he got annoyed. But then, his hand slid to her neck. His grip tightened. "Since I'm in a good mood, I'll grant you a reward." His voice was calm, almost amused. "Ask me one question. I'll answer graciously." She hesitated, then gathered her courage. "Why me?" He chuckled, tightening his grip. Predictable. Of course she would ask that. And because it was so obvious, he found it utterly boring. Still, since he had promised, he would answer. Releasing his grip, he leaned back and spoke. "When I announced my desire to marry, nobles sent me portraits of their daughters, so many that they could cover every wall of my vast room." He tilted his head slightly toward her. "Do you know why I did that?" She answered quickly. "So you could see everyone's face clearly." Inside, she felt a flicker of satisfaction. He must have chosen me because my face stood out among them all. Before she could think further, a dagger flew past her, startling her. She looked up. It was Raniello who had thrown it. "That night," he continued, "I did the same. I sat in my room and threw a dagger, the one it landed on." He smirked. "Pierced the left eye of your portrait. That's why I chose you?" He suddenly stood up. "What is your name?" The question caught her off guard. She searched her memory, trying to recall the Empress's name. "Angelica Vignardionro." Raniello's eyes gleamed. "And what does your family call you?" "Angie." He chuckled, tilting her chin up with his foot. "Work hard to not make me bored of you." She forced a smile. "I'll do my best." Without another word, he left the room. She exhaled shakily, finally feeling relief. Lying back on the floor, she let out a small, exhausted laugh. "At least I survived today." The truth was, she didn't even know the Empress's real name. Maybe the one I mentioned belonged to the Empress who died before he met Serafina. But none of that mattered now. She had managed to survive their wedding day, and that in itself was an achievement. As she slept, she felt movement behind her. A voice began counting. Her eyes snapped open. She needed to get up before the countdown finished. Realizing the urgency, she hurriedly sat up. Her gaze darted beside her. Raniello was sitting there, his bare chest exposed. "Why is he here?" As if reading her mind, he answered, "It was bothersome to return to my room." Her breath hitched. "Did I say that out loud?" But he leaned in, grasping her chin. "Your expression said everything, even an idiot can read it." He stood up, covering his lower half with a sheet. Such a lazy Empress, waking up past 9. Shock washed over her. "An Empress can't sleep in." He left the room while she sat there, stunned. Why didn't anyone wake me up? Soon the headmaid approached. "Shall I prepare your bath, Your Majesty?" As she soaked in the warm water, her mind raced. "What's today's date?" she asked the maid. After calculating based on the answer, she realized she had exactly 7 months before Raniello met Serafina in the temple. As the memories of this body settled in, she learned more about the Empress's past. She had 3 siblings. She was a noble lady, meaning she possessed knowledge useful for survival. If she needed to flee, she should know which country to seek refuge in. The choice of the country didn't matter. Nothing would last once spring arrived. The moment Raniello, Serafina, and her lover crossed paths, the empire would begin its downfall. Her only focus was survival. At breakfast, she observed the servants. Just like in a novel, they did their work but never meddled beyond their duties. Excited, she asked for their names. The headmaid smiled and introduced herself. When she finished eating, she inquired about her schedule for the day. "You have no duties scheduled, Your Majesty," the head maid informed her. "No duties?" She smiled. A day off wasn't bad. She had 7 months to execute her plan. But the next day, it was the same. And the next. Again and again, the answer remained unchanged. She had no duties. That's when she realized something was wrong. An empress couldn't be this free. They handled the palace's budget, social affairs, and noble connections. But no one handed her any documents. They were ignoring her. She lay in bed, comfortable but uneasy. This couldn't continue. Then, she remembered, in the novel, the empress had brought a personal maid to the palace. But that maid was nowhere to be seen. The next day, she asked the head maid about it. "She is in training to serve in the palace," the maid replied. "Training? Then why hadn't anyone told her?" She asked just that. The maid answered smoothly, "You never asked, Your Majesty." She bit her tongue, forcing a smile. No need for unnecessary tension. For now, Lady Marquis sat there, her expression clearly annoyed by the Empress's behavior earlier. Her son, Marquis Jacques, noticed her frustration and asked what was bothering her. She expressed her dissatisfaction with the Empress, who came from a low country yet dared to argue with her. Soon, her daughter Sylvia arrived. She was once rumored to become the Empress, but that never happened, a fact that deeply irritated Lady Marquis. She voiced her regret, recalling how she had turned down numerous noble marriage proposals, believing Sylvia would take the throne. In the end, her daughter received nothing. Unlike her mother, Sylvia saw things differently. She believed that, as emperor, he had the right to choose his partner. However, Lady Marquis was convinced that the only reason the emperor chose that woman was because she was good in bed. She scolded Sylvia harshly, calling her naive. Hurt by her mother's words, Sylvia ran out of the room in tears. Meanwhile, Jacques continued his inquiry. He questioned whether the emperor had visited the empress since their wedding night. Lady Marquis admitted that he had not. This revelation confirmed Jacques' suspicion. Raniello had no real interest in the empress. They only needed to find a flaw to exploit. A satisfied smile spread across Lady Marquis's face. The empress, in her eyes, was filled with shortcomings. Jacques knew that the emperor was known for eliminating those who harmed the nation. Recently, an important budget approval was underway, requiring approvals from both the emperor and the empress. Yet the empress had done nothing, instead living leisurely. This was the perfect opportunity to bring her down. The maid who had accompanied the empress had finally arrived, bringing her a sense of relief. Unlike the palace servants, this maid knew her well. Meanwhile, Lady Marquis and her subordinates continued to ostracize her. But she chose not to react, believing it wasn't worth the trouble. However, one day she realized her mistake too late. As a result, she found herself summoned before the emperor. Upon arriving, she noticed 2 people were already present. One of them was Lady Marquis, whom she recognized immediately. The other was an unfamiliar man. Both were half kneeling before the emperor. Understanding that her survival depended on appearing even more submissive, she immediately knelt fully, lowering herself beneath them. Raniello observed her actions and remarked on her immediate submission. He questioned whether she even knew why she'd been summoned or if she had a condition with her legs as well. Realizing the sarcasm in his words, she answered quickly that her legs were perfectly fine. The emperor then addressed Marquis Jacques, who introduced himself as the Deputy Secretary of State. He revealed that he had prepared the palace budget for the 3rd quarter, but claimed there was a significant issue within it, directly related to the Empress. She was caught off guard as Raniero demanded answers about her supposed involvement. Marquis Jacques confidently accused her of neglecting her responsibilities, stating that since she had no intention of fulfilling her duties as the Empress. Jacques hit her as she finally understood why she had been deliberately kept away from palace matters. The lack of assigned work was not negligence, but a carefully laid trap to paint her as incompetent. As the accusations piled up, she recognized that most of his claims were fabricated, but she had no evidence to disprove them. The maids had been complicit in keeping her in the dark, and the only person she could rely on was Sisson. Raniero, with his ever-present smirk, shifted his attention back to Marquis Jacques, asking what he intended to do next. The Marquis, feigning loyalty, insisted that he only sought justice for the Empire. Raniero had little patience for matters he found dull, and budget discussions were of no interest to him. But he played along with the accusations, pressing the Empress to justify herself. She realized that Raniero's method of decision-making was dangerously unpredictable. What he found unpleasant, he deemed guilty, and what entertained him, he excused. She knew that persuading him about something as mundane as a budget issue was futile. As she processed the predicament, it dawned on her that because she was a reader of the original novel, she was possibly the only one who understood Raniero's true nature. While others viewed him as a cruel emperor who sought pleasure in domination, she saw a ruler who had little to do with the nation's well-being. She quickly took responsibility for the oversight, blaming herself for not handling the budget beforehand. But she knew words alone wouldn't be enough. Then, in an attempt to divert his attention and lighten his mood, she made a bold suggestion. an entertainment fitting for the emperor's taste. A flicker of interest sparked in his red eyes as he leaned in, intrigued. She proposed a dangerous game, a human hunt, turning the court's attention toward an unexpected form of entertainment. Her words sent shockwaves through the room as she suggested that the prey would be none other than herself and those standing beside her. Raniero watched with amusement, intrigued by her boldness. She continued, explaining that the people of the empire were descendants of the god of war, trained to become soldiers at any moment, making them perfect candidates for such a hunt. Understanding the emperor's cruel sense of entertainment, she played along, knowing that in the original story, human hunting was an event that had piqued his interest. But she also understood that her position as prey needed justification. With no choice but to gamble, she feigned an excuse, referencing her supposed illness and recent arrival in Actilis to buy herself time. Raniero, however, was not one to be easily fooled. Comparing her to a sick rabbit unfit for hunting, he questioned whether she was planning to escape. She hastily proposed postponing the hunt until winter, until she became worthy to provide such entertainment. Her unexpected boldness caught everyone off guard, causing an uproar. Marquis Jacques protested vehemently, calling the proposal absurd. However, the Empress countered, questioning why he hadn't approached her directly to resolve the issue instead of wasting the Emperor's precious time. Raniero, intrigued by her words, decided to humor her suggestion. He found her unpredictability entertaining, and his amusement was evident as he acknowledged that, for an empress, she wasn't bad. Marquis Jacques, desperate, tried to redirect the punishment onto himself, pleading for mercy on behalf of his mother. But Raniero, unfazed, turned his words against him, reminding him that it was an honor to become prey for his entertainment, just as the empress had stated. As chaos erupted, the empress pieced together Raniero's true nature. He had known about the Marquis's schemes all along, yet chose to let them unfold. Sylvia, the Marquis's younger sister, had not been chosen as empress, and this resentment had fueled the current predicament. Yet, instead of intervening earlier, Raniero had let events spiral, watching from his throne like a god overseeing a spectacle. Raniero observed her reaction closely, amused by her resilience. He lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. Without warning, he leaned in, stealing a sudden kiss, testing her composure. She stiffened, unsure whether to resist or endure. Her instincts screamed at her to push him away, but she knew that any mistake could cost her dearly. As he pulled back, he studied her expression with satisfaction. He enjoyed seeing her struggle, balancing between fear and wit, knowing that she was constantly calculating her next move. He reminded her of the precarious position she was in, questioning how long she could continue without slipping up. She was then abruptly pushed back, landing onto the Emperor's throne. Panic set in as she realized the implications of sitting in his seat. He towered over her, mocking her small frame, comparing her to a mere pet at a royal banquet. He smirked as he leisurely ran his fingers through her hair. That day, she remained trapped in his court until the sun dipped below the horizon, enduring his relentless games. By the time she was finally dismissed, exhaustion weighed heavily on her. She was so drained that she had no recollection of how she even made it back to her chambers. The next day, the palace atmosphere shifted. With the Marquis punished and his mother removed from her position, a new order took shape. The maids no longer looked down on the Empress, acknowledging her as someone who could not be ignored. Among them, her most trusted maid, Sisson, stepped forward, filling the vacant role of head maid. The Empress, once dismissed and ostracized, had now become a figure of intrigue and speculation. Rumors swirled, painting her as a cruel empress. But, instead of dwelling on whispers, she threw herself into the duties of an empress. Managing palace affairs was no easy feat, and the sheer volume of work overwhelmed her. Her trusted maid, Sisson, reminded her that she was still adjusting to Actilis. But the Empress knew it was more than that. Her abilities simply weren't functioning as they should, because she herself was not settled fully in this body yet. Among her many responsibilities, she had to oversee grand events such as the summer solstice. It was the most significant event in Actilis, honoring the god Actila, the sun deity. Just as she was adjusting, an unexpected figure appeared before her. Sylvia Jacques, the younger sister of Marquis Jacques. Sylvia had been standing there waiting. It became evident that she had come with a request, though the Empress suspected its nature. Sylvia had been waiting outside for days, hoping for an audience. Sylvia knelt, unwavering. Instead of pleading for mercy, she made a surprising request: to serve the Empress as a maid. The Empress hesitated, her instincts whispering caution. Could the daughter of her enemies truly be trusted? Was this a ploy to strike when she least expected? Sylvia's trembling voice did not waver in its resolve. Her body, fragile and weary, seemed to carry the burden of more than just her family's disgrace. She was not here for revenge, nor did she plead for mercy on behalf of those who had wronged her. She wanted to live, not merely survive, but live. The Empress, though cautious, understood the depths of Sylvia's desperation. But the court was no place for mercy alone. Survival demanded strategy. As night fell, uncertainty lingered in the Empress's mind. The burden of making the right decision weighed heavy on her shoulders. As she wandered through the dimly lit corridors of the palace, she was suddenly met with the sight of Raniero's face emerging from the shadows. A startled gasp escaped her lips before it turned into a full-fledged scream. "Is screaming another one of your condition?" he mused. Before she could fully register his presence, he reached out, his cold fingers wrapping around her wrist, anchoring her in place. She hesitated as he loomed closer, his presence overwhelming, almost suffocating. There had been a time when she thought there needed to be a reason for him to seek her out. His gaze held in amusement, as if toying with her fear. A light chuckle escaped his lips as she hiccuped nervously, his fingers tracing the side of her face. Before she could react, he closed the distance between them, his lips capturing hers in a kiss. As he pulled away, her mind was hazy with the lingering warmth of his touch. She remained frozen, dazed. A deep chuckle rumbled from his chest as he observed her reaction, his amusement only growing when he realized her hiccups had finally subsided. Soon their conversation shifted to the hunting game. The prey had begun training, he declared. But he had devised 2 new rules to make the game even more thrilling. The first rule stated that the prey could carry weapons, and if they survived for 3 hours, they would be granted freedom. Angie wanted to bring up the topic of Sylvia, but as she hesitated, Raniello, already aware of her concerns, suggested including Sylvia in the game. He proposed making her a hunter, allowing her to prove her loyalty and willingness to sever ties with her family. More than anything, he found the idea highly entertaining. To Angie, the very thought was cruel, but as Raniello poured wine into a glass, he remarked that it was the best way to test Sylvia's loyalty. If she passed, she could be appointed as a maid. Left with no other choice, Angie agreed. Raniello, amused by her hesitance, commented that he would personally give the order, as she was too weak. She looked at him, knowing that in Raniello's eyes, everyone was weak compared to him. He had been born human, but his past actions made it clear he was pure evil. While she was still lost in thought, Raniello suddenly splashed a glass of wine on her, startling her. His grin widened at her frightened reaction. Before she could recover, he pulled her toward the bed. As he hovered over her, she resolved not to make any mistakes and to survive until the end. Later, as they lay in bed, Raniello observed her closely and remarked on how small and lacking in vigor she was. At this rate, he doubted whether she would even make a decent prey by winter. His words jolted her memory. She too was supposed to become prey. But by winter, she would no longer be here, and Raniello would be preoccupied, meeting his lover, Serafina. Raniello explained the second rule. She was also required to participate as a hunter in the game. The revelation sent a wave of fear through Angie, causing her to sit up abruptly on the bed. Seeing her reaction, Raniello assured her that there was no need to worry since the prey could not harm the hunters. However, she knew all too well that if the Jacques family failed to survive, they would drag her down with them. A shiver ran through her body, and Raniello was well aware of this fact. She calculated the time left. Only a month remained before the hunting game. Watching the Jacques family train from behind the walls, she realized she wasn't even remotely on their level. A maid suggested she find a teacher, but she knew that even with the best instructor, she wouldn't master combat in just a month. Instead, she requested to learn archery. She couldn't afford the risks of close combat, so she chose the bow to attack from a distance. As training began, she fell to the ground. The bow was too heavy for her. The maid, puzzled, quietly informed her that it was a child's bow, meaning it shouldn't be that heavy. Determined, Angie pulled herself up and raised the bow. She had to survive. Meanwhile, Raniello informed Sylvia that she would be a hunter in the game. Her face turned pale at the news, but he ignored her reaction and instead asked about the Empress. A servant reported that the Empress had canceled all her social gatherings and had started learning archery. Raniello chuckled, finding it cowardly for anyone to rely on a bow in combat. However, with hesitation, the servant also informed him that the Empress had fainted during training. For a brief moment, Raniello flinched. Angie woke from unconsciousness and tried to get up, but her limbs were sore from training. She concluded that she must have been fragile since childhood. As she mumbled to herself, unaware of the presence beside her, Raniello suddenly spoke, questioning why she was talking as if she didn't remember her own childhood. Startled, she asked why he was there. Leaning closer, he lifted her chin and explained that since she had fainted, he assumed something serious had happened, so he came. As she sat in silence, waiting for him to leave, she quickly realized he had no intention of doing so. Raniello observed her with amusement before murmuring that she was so weak and foolish that she caught a fever too easily. Hurt by his words, she couldn't stop the tears from welling up as she admitted that she knew she was weak, but she also understood that in order to survive, she had to practice. Her sudden tears made Raniello flinch, clearly not expecting such a reaction. But soon he chuckled and casually announced that he wouldn't let her die. As he stood, she frowned, convinced he was lying. However, to her surprise, Raniello gently laid her down and ordered cold water and a towel. He assured her that since she was ill, he would take care of her. That assurance only made her tremble because, as she feared, the Emperor clearly had no idea how to care for someone. Without hesitation, he threw the soaked towel directly onto her face. Her pale, stunned expression must have finally registered because moments later, he called for a maid, who swiftly took over the task with practiced efficiency. As he sat beside her, Raniello sighed, complaining that he had never seen anyone turn this pale from a single training session. The maid hesitated before suggesting that perhaps the Empress was simply too fragile and unaccustomed to such physical exertion. Hearing this, Raniello let out a chuckle and mused aloud, asking Angie if being weak was yet another one of her conditions. When the maid brought food, he still didn't leave. Instead, he remained seated and personally fed her. Angie looked at him, momentarily wondering if he was actually concerned for her well-being. But that illusion was shattered when she realized his real reason. He wanted her to recover quickly so he could see her train again tomorrow. As he stood, he complained about how long it would take before she became an entertaining prey for him. The words sent a shiver down her spine, but she quickly gathered herself and assured him that she would soon find a better teacher to improve her training. Raniello looked momentarily surprised at her determination, but then, as if struck by an idea, he smirked and announced that he himself would be her teacher. All color drained from her face. The devil himself teaching her? Seeing her reaction, his expression darkened as he asked if she had a problem with it. She quickly collected herself, forcing a smile as she praised him, saying she was simply shocked and that there could be no better teacher than him. But deep inside, she knew the truth. She was doomed. The next day, she regained her strength, and the maid informed her that after she had fallen asleep, Raniello never left the room. He had remained by her side all night until dawn. She quickly got dressed for training and made her way to the training grounds. By the time she arrived, she was already panting, but a sense of satisfaction filled her. Raniello was nowhere in sight, meaning she had arrived first. However, that relief was short-lived. His voice rang out from behind, complaining about how late she was. Her moment of victory disappeared instantly. He handed her a bow, one he had specifically prepared for her. Seeing a bow that belonged to her, rather than one borrowed, filled her with joy. Raniello then raised his hand, brushing his fingers against her forehead and ears to check if she still had a fever. The unexpected touch made her stiffen, but he simply turned away and, without another word, ordered her to begin practice. As practice began, Raniello quickly grew bored of archery within half an hour. Without hesitation, he handed Angie a wooden sword and initiated a sword training session instead. As skilled as he was with a sword, he was just as terrible at teaching. Without giving her any proper basics, he immediately started practice. Angie did her best to keep up with him, but soon enough, she found herself defeated once again, lying on the ground, panting from exhaustion. Standing over her, Raniello complained, questioning how she could not prevent his attacks when, according to him, they were completely obvious. Understanding that arguing with him was pointless, Angie simply apologized, admitting she couldn't follow his movements. Raniello mumbled to himself, commenting that if her eyesight was also one of her conditions, then how did she expect to attack prey from a distance? Only an idiot would think that. He then took it upon himself to explain every move, personally guiding her through the techniques. When she struggled to keep up, he complained again, wondering how she always managed to find new ways to fail. But despite his impatience, what was truly surprising was that, unlike everything else he quickly lost interest in, Raniello continued training her. Angie, feeling a rare sense of gratitude, thanked him. He responded by ruffling her hair in appreciation, a gesture that left her momentarily stunned. As time passed, rumors began spreading among the nobles. Stories of how the emperor personally took care of his wife, and even trained her himself, circulated through the palace. Naturally, the source of these rumors was the maids around the empress. Angie knew how people now saw them as a devoted, affectionate couple, but she felt no need to correct them. It wasn't beneficial for her that so many nobles were taking an interest in her, especially with her plan to escape. But at the same time, avoiding conflict with the emperor was crucial to ensuring her safe departure. Raniello continued practicing with her every morning, and as usual, whenever she failed, he would complain, this time about how small and slow her brain was, and how her body wasn't any better. Between training and preparing for the upcoming summer solstice festival, she barely had time for anything else. She hadn't seen Sylvia in a while, but she didn't even have the energy to think about it. Whenever she had even a moment of rest, Raniello would appear in her palace, and the moment he did, everyone around her would immediately scatter, fleeing the room. Even after all this time, she was still frightened of him. Raniello suddenly complained, asking why she was looking at him like that, as if she were silently telling him to shut up and leave. Afraid that he would misunderstand her, she quickly tried to explain. But before she could even begin, in a fraction of a second, he cupped her face, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers, sealing the space between them. The kiss felt overwhelming. like she was being completely consumed by Raniello Actilis. As he pulled away, she trembled, still breathless, unable to form words. Without saying anything, Raniello unzipped her dress, stripping it away and tossing it aside. He looked at her, amused, commenting on how slow she was at learning even this. He knew everything about her, what she liked and where, while she knew nothing about him. In the next moment, he turned her towards the mirror, whispering that, for now, as much as he would love to continue. It wasn't what she was expecting. It was a dress he had prepared for her to wear at the festival. But he reminded her that she could only wear it if she survived the hunt, otherwise it would be a pity. As the summer festival arrived, a growing fear settled in her chest. In the afternoon, the hunt would begin, and she had no choice but to participate. While getting ready, the weight of the upcoming event loomed over her. She arrived where Raniello was waiting. As she apologized for being late, he pulled her onto his lap, making her blush. He then asked about her strategy for the hunt. She explained that she would take higher ground so she could strike from a distance without engaging in close combat. Raniello chuckled at her plan, pointing out that she had never even managed to strike him back during their training. Hastily, she defended herself, saying that at least she had been able to survive for 30 seconds. But Raniello only smiled lightly, correcting her. She had survived only because he had chosen to let her. Soon, the announcement was made, and the summer festival began. The Emperor and Empress stepped onto the balcony, hand in hand, acknowledging the gathered crowd. At the feast, though the table was filled with delicious food, she couldn't eat. The weight of the hunt consumed her thoughts. Raniello, noticing her anxiety, offered her a drink. Despite her doubts, the fear of both the hunt and the Emperor himself made her accept it. She quickly gulped it down. The moment the liquid went down her throat, an unfamiliar sensation spread through her body. A strange heat consumed her, as if something was burning inside. Raniello assured her that everything would be fine soon. Moments later, something changed within her. A sudden burst of laughter escaped her lips, startling those around her, but she didn't care. It felt as if she were a completely different person. Fear no longer existed within her. Instead, a strange excitement took its place. With her inhibitions gone, she even finished an entire dish without hesitation. As she prepared for the hunt, her fear had vanished entirely, replaced by an eagerness she hadn't felt before. A maid handed her a small gift from Raniello, an extracted poison to use as she saw fit in the hunt. When she arrived at the hunting grounds, she noticed Sylvia standing there, her body trembling. But in her current state, Angie no longer felt sympathy or guilt. This was Sylvia's fate. If she survived, she would earn her wish. A new announcement rang out, and unexpectedly Raniello himself arrived at the hunting grounds. He chuckled and reminded her that, as promised, he wouldn't let her die. The gates opened. Sylvia was the first to enter. Now, it was Angie's turn. But at this moment, she realized she had become just like Raniello. Taking the high ground, she positioned herself to strike at the first person who appeared. As she focused, she spotted movement, Sylvia, but she wasn't her target. Lowering her guard for a moment, she watched as Sylvia's mother suddenly appeared, attacking her own daughter. They were no longer family. They were hunter and prey. Angie positioned her arrow and struck, but it landed between the mother and daughter. Lady Marquess immediately noticed her presence. Before she could react, Sylvia shoved her mother to the ground, and the two began to fight. It was a simple game of survival. Sylvia, determined to live, grabbed a stone and struck her mother down. When Angie reached the ground, Sylvia bowed before her, declaring that she had done her duty in offering prey to the Empress and proving her loyalty. But in the next moment, she staggered and collapsed, losing consciousness. Marquis Jacques arrived at the scene, his eyes burning with challenge. Without hesitation, Angie positioned her arrow toward him. Before he could close the distance, she loosed the arrow, striking him first. Then something shifted inside her. A sudden weakness overtook her body, and she collapsed to the ground. Something was wrong, she couldn't move. Marquis Jacques saw the opportunity and attacked. She fell backward, helpless. Lying there, her mind went blank. Was this her final moment in this novel? Seizing his chance, Marquis Jacques raised his axe, preparing to strike her down and avenge his mother. But before the blow could land, a blade pierced through him. Raniello stood behind him, his sharp sword buried deep in Jacques' body. The Marquis crumpled to the ground. As Angie looked up at the man who had saved her, he smiled, reminding her, "Didn't he promise that he wouldn't let her die?" He pulled her into his embrace. She winced, complaining about the pain, only for him to explain that it was the effect of the drug he had given her. It had temporarily removed her fear and granted her full strength. But once the effects wore off, the exhaustion hit all at once. He pulled out another bottle, and Angie's immediate reaction was to protest. Was he giving her another drug? Raniello assured her that it was simply a painkiller. To prove it, he poured some into his mouth first. Then, in the next moment, he closed the distance, pouring the same dose into her mouth from his. Angie's pain had lessened within a short while as the painkillers began to take effect. Raniello laughed loudly, showing off the prey she had taken down that day, clearly satisfied with her performance. Later, he announced the results to the people of Actilis, and the crowd erupted in praise for the Empress, who had proven herself a true Actilan. Angie could clearly see how much the people of Actilis worshipped power. Earlier, they had looked down on her, but now their attitude had completely changed. "Tonight's banquet will be dedicated to the Empress," Raniello declared, wrapping his arm around her shoulder. When night fell and the banquet began, Angie sat beside him. He kept staring at her, making her uneasy. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked awkwardly. "Well, I'm interested," he replied lazily, his eyes still fixed on her. Angie smiled proudly. "Thank you. Receiving your honor is an honor." Raniello chuckled. "Well, I'm interested in the fact that I can now recognize your face." Her pride shattered instantly. Now that she thought about it, most people easily remembered others' faces, but in the story she had read, Raniello couldn't recognize anyone's. She used to think it was just because he was the emperor and didn't bother to remember, but now it felt strange that someone as intelligent as him couldn't do so. As she got lost in thought, she didn't realize when they reached the dance floor. "What are you so preoccupied with? You look lost," Raniello asked, studying her expression. She flinched, realizing how absorbed she'd been. "Perhaps I'm still suffering from the side effects of the drug," she replied quickly. "I don't enjoy lies," he said, pulling her closer by the waist as the music started. The banquet's dance only began after the Emperor and Empress shared the first dance, so Angie reminded herself not to irritate him. Luckily, her body still remembered how to dance, though not perfectly. In trying too hard not to step on his feet, she lost her balance and tripped. Raniello's hand reached out to catch her, but she stopped herself. She couldn't touch him without his permission. As a result, she fell hard onto the floor with a loud thud. Raniello smirked. "I'm impressed that you didn't make any mistakes," he said dryly. Angie sighed in relief, realizing she had been right not to grab his hand. Turning to the others, Raniello warned them, "Do not look down on my Empress." Then he lifted her in his arms and carried her to his throne. As the banquet continued, Sylvia entered the hall. "Greetings, Your Majesty," she said, kneeling. The people began to murmur, calling her shameless for showing up after her mother and brother had tried to harm the Empress. Some even urged Angie to punish her. But Angie raised her glass calmly. "She fought with her mother for me. Isn't that proof of loyalty?" she said with a faint smile. Raniello burst out laughing at her confident, queenly answer. Seeing the Emperor laugh, no one dared question further. Instead, everyone forced themselves to join in the laughter. "Your Majesty," Sylvia spoke again, "I have come to receive the reward you promised." Raniello nodded. "Right, as I said, you'll be appointed as an attendant to the Empress." Sylvia bowed deeply. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she said before leaving. Angie realized how clever she was. Sylvia could have asked for her reward in private, but by doing it here, in front of everyone, she made sure that all of Actilis knew she was now the Empress's attendant. No one would dare underestimate her again. As the banquet stretched late into the evening, Angie quietly excused herself from the hall. She walked outside and sat near the fountain, her thoughts drifting. She wondered why she had been reincarnated into this fantasy novel in the first place. Soon, footsteps approached from behind. It was Raniello. "You seem fine," he commented casually. "Pardon?" Angie asked, confused. "You seem surprisingly unaffected, considering how many people you've killed," he added, placing a beautiful flower behind her ear. Angie lowered her gaze. She did feel guilty, but nothing could change what had happened. She had only done it to survive. "Perhaps because they weren't close to me," she said softly. "I simply won and survived, that's all." Then she bowed politely. "And thank you. If you hadn't killed Marquis Jacques, I would have died." Raniello smirked. To him, that kind of battle was nothing more than a fight between ants. The others had clear reasons to fight, but Angie didn't. That was precisely why he had drugged her earlier, to see her desperation, to see something interesting unfold. He had known about the side effects, but it didn't concern him. Everything had gone according to his plan. Except one thing. He hadn't expected her reaction. He thought she'd be terrified, drowning in guilt, too shaken to attend the banquet. But instead, she had surprised him. That unexpected strength excited him. Perhaps that was why, for the first time, he could clearly remember her face. Raniello extended his hand. "We should go back inside." Angie hesitated, then finally placed her hand in his. The first human face Raniello ever truly recognized was that of someone fragile and delicate. He led her inside, but instead of returning to the hall, he took her to a private chamber. Angie's heartbeat quickened when she realized it was his room. She had read about it before in the novel. While she was busy recalling those details, Raniello began unbuttoning his shirt. Angie's face turned crimson. She quickly looked away, afraid to meet his eyes without permission. Raniello chuckled. "You can look. You have my permission," he said smoothly. Before she could respond, he reached for her, pulling her close and pinning her gently between his arm and the wall. His face inched closer, his breath brushing her lips. "Please stop," Angie whispered, her voice trembling. "Do you want me to stop?" he murmured, his lips grazing hers. The next moment, there was a splash. The man had stepped into the steaming bath. "Angie, come here," Raniello ordered. She nodded quietly. taking off her shoes and arranging her dress before dipping her feet into the hot water. Her body trembled at the sudden warmth. "It'll be fine once you're inside. You're too fearful," Raniello said before pulling her closer by the waist. "My dress," Angie gasped, flustered. "Don't bother," he smirked. Then, with a teasing tone, asked, "Does the water still feel too hot?" She shook her head but found it hard to stay steady. Her trembling hands couldn't reach for him without permission. Normally, Raniello was pleased when people obeyed him precisely, but right now her restraint irritated him. "Angie," he said firmly, looking into her eyes. "You have my permission." Startled, she hurriedly reached out, wrapping her soft hands around him to steady herself. Her touch was hesitant yet warm. But as soon as she held on to him, something within Raniello stirred, a desire that had been quietly building all night. And Angie's struggle with him continued through the night, caught between fear, restraint, and the Emperor's unrelenting will. As morning arrived, Angie slept peacefully while the man sat beside her. Now, even when he closed his eyes, he could clearly see her face. As he was lost in thought, Angie began to stir in her sleep. Her breathing turned erratic. She seemed to be having a nightmare, almost hyperventilating. Raniello immediately pulled her into his arms and pressed his lips against hers, sharing his breath to calm her. But Angie, startled by the closeness even in her half-sleep, bit his lip. Raniello frowned. No one had ever dared to do that to him before. Without hesitation, he pressed his lips back against hers more firmly, deepening the contact until he was satisfied. When he finally pulled away, a thin line of blood trailed down from his lip. On the other side, Angie had woken up, trembling. "In my dream, I saw one of the prey coming after me, with its head cut off, holding an axe," she whispered shakily. She reached out instinctively to hold on to him, but stopped midway, realizing what she was doing. "Go on," Raniello said quietly, granting his permission. Only then did Angie press herself against his broad chest for comfort. "I'm scared," she admitted in a small voice. Raniello watched her for a moment, then raised his arm to hold her, offering silent reassurance. Slowly, Angie relaxed in his arms and drifted back to sleep. When she woke again later, she dressed and went to the breakfast table, only to find him sitting across from her. His sharp gaze made her uneasy. "Your Majesty," she began carefully, "I want to go home." The words slipped out before she realized her mistake. She should have said palace. "Isn't this your home now?" Raniello asked, raising an eyebrow. I apologize. "Maybe I didn't get enough sleep," Angie said, embarrassed. "But I think you slept plenty last night," he replied, with a faint smirk. "Actually, Sylvia is moving to my palace today," Angie added quickly, trying to make an excuse. "I should be there as her superior." As she spoke, her eyes drifted to his lips. They looked slightly bruised. Was that blood? She was sure they'd been fine last night. Who could have hurt him? Suddenly, Raniello met her gaze. She flinched, realizing she had been staring. "Oh, I apologize," she said quickly. "I noticed you were hurt. Are you all right?" Raniello chuckled, then reached out, grabbing the back of her neck and pulling her close. "If it bothers you," he murmured, "why not take a better look?" Their faces were now inches apart. His breath brushed her skin as he whispered against her ear, "Because you did this." Angie's eyes widened in shock. I did?" she stammered. Why would she do something so reckless? Was she out of her mind? She gulped nervously before replying, "That's impossible. If I had done that, I wouldn't still be sitting here, with my head attached." Raniello leaned back slightly, a faint smile on his lips. "You do have a point." Angie let out a small sigh of relief, only for it to vanish a second later. "But hurting my face is a grave crime," he continued calmly, "and one must be properly punished." Angie nodded hesitantly. "Yes, whoever made a mistake should be punished." Raniello's grin widened. "Then your punishment," he announced, "is that you cannot go home." And just like that, Angie found herself stuck with him. That morning, as Raniello read through the letters brought to him, he opened one and murmured, "A letter from the Temple of Tuya, the Temple of Tunya, built in the barren, lordless West. Once, a fertile land had been gifted to the god of mercy, and the desolate land that remained was given to the god's descendants. Only the most devoted believers stayed there. Now, as tensions between Actilus and Samvinia continued to rise, the temple had sent a plea for aid under the pretense of mercy. But to Raniello, it wasn't worth a reply. He set the letter aside, without hesitation. Turning, he called out to his empress, only to find that she had already drifted to sleep beside him. He leaned closer, hovering over her, his fingers brushing her cheek gently. "You must be out of your mind to fall asleep like this," he murmured under his breath. His gaze lingered on her soft lips, and a mischievous thought crossed his mind. Without warning, he leaned in and nibbled lightly on them. Angie jolted awake with a startled scream, her eyes wide in shock. Only to realize it was him, she quickly covered her lips, looking at him in disbelief, silently asking what was that. Raniello straightened up nonchalantly and returned to his chair. "Don't sleep like that," he said casually before resuming his work. As he began replying to letters, Angie hesitated, then spoke softly. "Your Majesty, if possible, I'd like something to do. Perhaps I could take a look at the papers you're reviewing?" Raniello glanced at her. She looked sincere and, admittedly, adorable. Indeed, the Empress had every right to know. But not yet. Without a word, he turned back to his desk and continued writing, ignoring her question. Angie fumbled nervously in her seat, unsure if she had said something wrong or if he was angry. Raniello, watching her from the corner of his eye, couldn't help but chuckle quietly at her expression. She looked so flustered and cute that he decided to let it go. Later that day, he dragged her along everywhere, to his meals, to his training sessions, and through every task on his schedule. Angie followed him silently until finally, she was dismissed only after everything had been completed. At night, Duchess Nirma wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and smiled. "I'm happy to see you two getting along," she said warmly. But for Angie, it was turning into a disaster. Spending time with Raniello was utterly exhausting. Then Nirma suggested, "Why don't you reschedule the social events you postponed earlier?" The words made Angie's face pale. She had completely forgotten about those, and now, they were setting the date for next month, just 3 weeks away. As days passed, Angie kept wondering when she would ever find the time to plan her escape if she remained so busy with palace affairs. But she couldn't simply ignore her duties either. So she spent her days learning about all the nobles from the books Duchess Nirma had recommended. However, memorizing all those names and details gave her a splitting headache. That was when Raniello appeared, snatching the book from her hands. "What are you reading?" he asked, glancing through the pages. After skimming a few lines, he tossed the book aside and flopped down, resting his head on her lap. "I don't know who gave you this, but you're wasting your time," he said flatly. "Oh? Am I?" Angie asked, confused. Raniello sat up, taking her chin between his fingers. "Yes. You'll sit like this, chin high, an arrogant smile, and say, 'I don't know you, and I have no need to know you. However, I shall listen to your introduction.'" Angie blinked at his bold suggestion. But Raniello didn't back down. Leaning closer, he said, "You are my wife and the Empress, so just reign over them. But that's how you rule, Your Majesty," she said softly. He leaned close to her ear and whispered, "And why shouldn't you rule as I do? Besides, I should be the only one who knows how fragile and delicate you truly are." Then he pulled back casually and added, "One more thing. If you want to be like me, learn to control your facial expressions. You're too easy to read." Angie's expression stiffened. But she couldn't deny he was right. She wore every feeling on her face. Suddenly, Raniello turned back to her. "By the way, are you feeling unwell?" he asked. Caught off guard, Angie blinked. "No, I feel fine," she replied. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right." A week later, the day of the social event arrived. Angie's maid, Suzanne, who had come with her from her homeland, quietly advised, "Your Majesty, we should postpone the gathering. You're not well. You're on your period." But Duchess Nirma disagreed firmly. "It can't be postponed now," she said. Angie stood to the side, her stomach aching painfully. That must have been why Raniello had asked earlier if she was unwell. She sighed softly before speaking. "You're both right, but I can't ignore my duties. Bring me my pain medicine, and let us continue with the gathering." The hall was filled with murmurs as the gathering continued. Angie, throbbing with pain, immediately regretted her decision to attend. In her original life, it had never been this unbearable, but now that she had entered the hall, she knew the show had to go on. Forcing a smile, she thanked everyone for coming and accepting her invitation. She believed Duchess Nirma had invited only those noble women who would be good allies for her. But as she sat there, her vision blurred, and it became harder to concentrate. The pain made it impossible to recall what she had studied in the past days. She couldn't even recognize who was who anymore. At that moment, she remembered Raniello's words. It was too late to regret, so she decided to follow his advice. "I don't know who you are," she said, her tone cool and commanding. "So why not introduce yourselves?" Her expression carried the same dangerous glint her husband was known for. Everyone froze, stunned by the sudden arrogance of the Empress, especially Duchess Nirma. But Angie didn't falter. "You're making me wait," she added sharply. That was enough to make everyone move. The noble women hurriedly began their introductions one after another. Angie smiled faintly, satisfied. "I'm glad to meet everyone," she said. Once the introductions were over, the women began chatting and sipping their tea. The air had just started to relax when Raniello entered. Everyone was taken aback by his sudden appearance and immediately stood to greet him. His gaze swept across the room until it landed on Angie. Seeing her pale face, he sighed, then walked over and lifted her into his arms without a word. "I suddenly felt the urge to be with my Duchess," he said coolly. "So, I'll be taking her. Enjoy yourselves." The hall went silent in shock as Raniello turned and left, ignoring everyone's stunned faces. In his arms, Angie clung to him. For the first time, she felt relief, grateful to see her husband, and surprised at how effortlessly he could bend every situation his way. He carried her straight to her bedroom, gently laying her on the bed, before ordering the maids to bring more pain medicine. Pulling a chair beside her, he sat down. "I guess you overestimated yourself," he said with a faint smile, patting her head. "But I'm glad those fools were so easy to deal with. It worked out in your favor." Angie nodded weakly, then suddenly sat up. Shouldn't you be at the council meeting? I didn't go, he replied casually. It would have been boring. Then, with a small chuckle, he added, Besides, it was more interesting to see what you'd do in there. Angie looked at him, wondering how a man like this managed to rule the most powerful nation. What was the meeting about? She asked, changing the topic. The Temple of Tunya, he answered. Angie flinched slightly at the name. The temple? That was where the main protagonist, Serafina, was. The temple? She repeated. Raniello noticed the change in her tone but continued explaining. The Temple of Tunya was small and barren, which was why Actilus had never paid it much attention. The priests there always preached peace between Actilus and Samvinia. But this time, their letter was about monsters, the eggs were about to hatch, and the issue needed to be dealt with. So, will you go there? Angie asked, her voice serious. She was certain he would, knowing his fondness for battle and bloodshed. Raniello looked at her silently for a moment, noticing how tightly she was clenching her dress. Then, with a playful smile, he said, Who knows? Maybe I'll show them mercy, if they kneel before me. But Angie's heart was restless. The mention of the temple had brought back her memories of the novel. If Serafina was there, what if the temple sent her as a representative? According to the original story, she and Raniello were supposed to meet in winter, but back then, Angie hadn't been this close to him. What if the timeline had already changed? What if her memory was wrong? Lost in thought, she didn't notice when Raniello popped a candy into her mouth. It'll help, he said. She nodded absently, realizing that lately he had been doing small things like this, almost as if nursing her was a game he enjoyed. Then suddenly she asked, Your Majesty, will you keep me alive at least until winter? Raniello raised an eyebrow, surprised by the question. Then he chuckled. Perhaps you should try harder, so that I'll want to keep you alive, he murmured, nudging her lower lip with his thumb before leaning closer and capturing her lips in a deep kiss. As time went by, Angie focused all her attention on the Temple of Tunya. She needed to gather more information about it, details that hadn't been mentioned in the novel. If things had changed and Serafina came earlier, the story could progress faster, and Angie might end up dead before winter. And yet, she still hadn't planned her escape route. She spent her days buried in books, reading everything she could find about the temple. What she discovered was that the Saintess was considered the most sacred being in the land. She never left the temple and didn't meet anyone from outside. In the original story, the focus had been on Raniello's violent desire for the Saintess of Tunya, but the books she read now focused more on the monsters that surrounded the temple. The area around Tunya was heavily infested with monsters that even bred near the temple walls. When food was scarce, these creatures hunted humans in the nearby territory. The temple, positioned at the border, acted as a barrier to protect the people from those monsters. Angie sighed in relief. From what she learned, Serafina would not come here. But then another thought struck her. If Raniello went to destroy the monsters, he might pass through the temple and meet her there. In that case, Angie decided, she would go with him. And if they did meet the Saintess, she would use that moment to escape. A few days later, that day finally arrived. Raniello sat on his throne, greeting the devotees from the Temple of Tunya, who had come seeking his help. Angie joined him, seated beside him, and was surprised to see that the Archbishop himself had come. Then her eyes drifted to the man standing next to him, the temple's holy knight, Eden. In the novel, Eden had been Serafina's first love. The holy knights were the temple's protectors, fighting against the monsters that threatened their land. Eden hadn't played a major role in the story, but he was known as a gifted young warrior. In the original tale, Serafina's lingering feelings for Eden had been what drove Raniello to kill him, turning the story into tragedy. Now that you've come for my help, Raniello said from his throne, his tone arrogant and cold, you must show your sincerity. Of course, the Archbishop began politely. You may not be much, but... He stopped when Raniello cut him off sharply. No. What value would your gifts have? Instead, why not kneel before me and beg for mercy? Angie sighed quietly beside him. As expected, he had to say something outrageous. But she also knew the temple had no choice. If they refused and returned without securing his help, they wouldn't survive the monster attacks. To everyone's surprise, it was Eden who stepped forward first. Without hesitation, he dropped to one knee before the Emperor. Seeing him, the others followed one by one, until the entire group was kneeling. Raniello laughed, his eyes glinting with amusement. What a sight this is, he murmured. Angie scowled softly at him. He really was acting like a true villain. Later, when Angie thought back to the event, she still found it unbelievable that Eden had been the first to kneel. In the original story, Eden had been described as stubborn and rebellious, a man who never conformed to anything he believed was wrong. By that logic, he should have been the only one standing, even if everyone else bowed. As she was lost in thought, Raniello's voice came from behind her. Where are you going? Oh, I'm just returning to my palace, Angie replied calmly. All right, let's go, he said, grabbing her hand and leading the way. As they walked, Raniello glanced at her. He had noticed that lately, Angie's interests had shifted. She no longer spent her time studying books on high society or court etiquette. Instead, She was absorbed in reading about the Temple of Tunya. She had even insisted on attending the meeting with the temple's representatives. The Anro kingdom, where she was from, had no connection with Tunya. The two lands were far apart. Yet, during the meeting, Raniello had noticed a change in her expression. Her reaction had been strange, almost emotional, especially when her eyes met the Holy Knights. Raniello smirked to himself at the thought. Later, Angie brought up the idea of hosting a dinner for the representatives of Tunya. "Who will be seated at the table?" she asked. Raniello leaned casually against the balcony railing. "What do you think?" he asked back. "Well, I suppose the Archbishop, the captain of the Holy Order, and the two eldest among the clergy." "That seems to be the correct order," she answered hesitantly. Raniello watched her carefully throughout the conversation, analyzing her expression. "To be honest," Angie added with a small laugh, "I don't really know who's most important. I've never seen them before." Raniello chuckled softly. 2 months ago, he would have found that answer dull, but now it amused him. He decided his suspicions were unnecessary. Angie didn't seem interested in the night after all. Relieved, he sat on the bed and called her name. "Angie," he said, motioning for her to come closer. Obediently, she stood and walked toward him. Raniello took her hand, admiring how compliant she was. But this time, he wanted to see a little more. With a sudden pull, he drew her toward him, and she stumbled, falling against his chest. "Angie," he said softly, smiling as her face turned pale with embarrassment. "Kiss me." The next day, Angie began to feel uneasy about Eden. Something about him didn't fit. She ordered her personal maid, Cézanne, to keep an eye on him. Over the following days, Cézanne reported that Eden often visited the library. He always read the same book, one that didn't seem related to Tunya, and kept it hidden beneath his cloak. He read it only in secluded places. If he was hiding it, Angie thought, it had to be something forbidden. Her heart pounded at the realization, and a bold idea began forming in her mind. But to confirm it, she couldn't rely on Cézanne anymore. She would have to see it herself. So when the day of the sparring session arrived, Angie feigned illness and asked Duchess Nirma and the other maids to attend the match in her place. Duchess Nirma immediately protested. "How can I leave your majesty alone when you're unwell?" Angie smiled reassuringly. "Cézanne will stay with me, so there's nothing to worry about. Besides, I want to know the result of the match. It would be best if you all went and told me about it later." Duchess Nirma's eyes lit up with excitement. The others, too, were eager to go. And since the Empress herself had given permission, they all left happily to watch the sparring match, leaving Angie alone with Cézanne. As soon as they were gone, Angie turned to her maid. "So, nobody will be near the library now, right?" Cézanne nodded nervously. "Yes, but do you really want to go there?" Angie smiled and patted her cheek gently. "Don't worry, nothing will happen." She trusted Cézanne. Her maid had come from her homeland, and would never report anything to the Emperor. Angie hurriedly wrapped a shawl around herself and left for the library. Looking around carefully, she saw that everyone was busy watching the match. Quietly, she hid in the bushes near the path leading to the library, waiting for Eden to appear. As expected, after a while, the knight arrived, his footsteps calm and steady as he walked. Angie swallowed hard before stepping out from her hiding spot. "Hey, I don't know what you're looking for, but you won't find it in there," she said quickly. "Visitors are restricted from most of the books." Eden turned to her calmly. "I'm not looking for anything. I'm just looking around," he replied, his tone so composed it almost made Angie doubt her suspicion. After a brief silence, she asked, "What's your name?" The knight looked down slightly. "My name is Eden. I have no surname, as I've devoted my mind and body to the god of Tunya," he said evenly. "What's your other name?" Angie asked again, her voice low and uncertain. Eden's eyes narrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she clarified, "your other name. The one you had before Tunya gave you this one. And if you don't have one, I won't ask again." Eden stared at her for a long moment, making Angie begin to doubt her theory. But then he lifted his gaze and said quietly, "My name is Cha Suhyun." Angie's heart steadied. So she had been right. "Do you know a book called The Flower That Blooms Even in the Abyss?" she asked hurriedly. "Yes," Eden replied. "I've read it." "Then, when did you possess this body?" "I came here about 2 months ago," she asked. Eden thought for a moment. "I guess around the same time. But I'm surprised. I'm not the only one who reincarnated here." "I thought the same," Angie said, almost collapsing in relief. "I really believed I was alone in this world." "Are you all right?" Eden asked, startled by her sudden emotion. "I'm fine," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm just happy." Eden smiled softly. "I see. Then what should I call you?" Angie looked up. "You can call me Your Majesty. Everyone here does." Eden bent down slightly and took her hand. "Then, Your Majesty, I'm pleased to meet you," he said with a warm smile. Then he added curiously, "But how did you find out about me?" "It was your behavior," Angie replied. "It didn't match the character from the novel at all. It didn't make any sense." She glanced around cautiously. "I can't stay here long, so let's get to the point. I heard you've been reading some kind of banned book. What is it?" Eden nodded. "Yes, I'm researching forbidden spells. I think that's what brought me into this world." Angie froze. She hadn't thought about it before, how she ended up here. Maybe because in all those fantasy novels she'd read, reincarnation had felt so familiar, so cliché that she'd never questioned it. Eden scratched his head. You said you thought you were alone, so does that mean the Emperor wasn't reincarnated from our world? Angie sighed. I wish he was. But no, he's the same insane man described in the novel. Eden frowned slightly, thinking. Then maybe the reason we were reincarnated here is because our characters died in the story. If I can uncover the spell that caused it, maybe I can undo it and send us back home. Go back. Home, Angie repeated softly. She had never even considered that possibility, because in stories like these, people rarely ever went back once they were reincarnated. On the other side, Raniello, who was watching the sparring match, felt utterly bored, or perhaps he was missing someone. His gaze kept drifting toward the empty seat beside him. After a while, he decided to leave and head to the Empress's palace. When he stepped inside, Sasan nearly jumped in shock at his sudden arrival. Your Majesty, what brings you here? She stammered. Raniello smirked. Should I not be here? He replied, walking straight to the bed and flipping the sheets. Seeing the empty bed, he muttered coldly, My wife, who was supposed to be sick, is not here. Sasan's face went pale. Your Majesty, she began, but his piercing gaze silenced her instantly. Why don't I hear that excuse from my wife herself? He said in a voice so cold it made her tremble. It wasn't hard to piece things together. The Holy Knight Eden hadn't participated in the sparring session, and the Empress had used illness as an excuse to stay behind. Raniello's lips curled slightly. How annoying, he muttered under his breath. Meanwhile, at the library, Angie was still speaking with Eden. So, if you're living in Tunia, have you met Serafina? She asked curiously. Serafina, Eden began, but then hesitated. What is it? Do you like her? Angie asked, worried, firing off questions. Eden quickly shook his head. No, it's actually the opposite. What? Why? Is she not a good person? Angie asked, confused. I'm not sure about her personality, Eden replied. Because I've been avoiding her. Angie frowned in confusion. He should have already synchronized with his character after taking over Eden's body. Then Eden spoke again. Actually, Eden hates Serafina. Angie's eyes widened. Why would Eden hate her? Eden sighed. Norms and doctrines are Eden's entire life. That's why he was disgusted that the Saintess harbored such feelings for him. It was new information for Angie. Something the novel had never revealed. Will you be joining the expedition to eliminate the monsters? She asked. Eden nodded. Yes. My purpose is to reach the Great Library of the Abandoned Sanctuary. I believe I can find more about the spell there. Angie nodded. Then I'll search for it in the Imperial Library. It's better to understand why we're here before we think about going back home. If I find anything, I'll tell you in Tunia, she promised excitedly. Are you going to join the monster hunt? Eden asked in surprise. I haven't discussed it with the Emperor yet, Angie admitted nervously, but I'll try. With that, they agreed to avoid contact for now and waved goodbye. Angie returned to her palace, relieved she had made it back before anything went wrong. But her relief vanished the moment she saw Raniello sitting there, waiting for her. I thought you were sick, he said lazily. Angie froze. Didn't you finish watching the match? I had a headache, so I went for a walk, she stammered nervously. Your hands are trembling, Raniello said, leaning closer. Are you guilty of something? It's because you're making such a scary expression, she said, her voice shaking. You met that holy knight, didn't you? He asked suddenly. Angie bit her lip. Are you doubting me? She asked softly. He was. 2 people had been absent at the same time. It wasn't hard to notice. But what was the problem? Even if his wife liked that knight, why should he care? The Emperor of Actilis does not feel jealousy. If his wife wanted that knight, shouldn't he just let her have him as a toy? Angie, terrified by his expression, dropped to the floor. You know I can't lie to you, she cried. What would I do if I got caught? It's too scary to even imagine. Raniello knelt down on one knee and gently touched her cheek. I guess you're right, he murmured, pulling her into his arms and hugging her tightly. You're not angry? Angie asked in confusion. Raniello sighed. If he said yes, she'd only fear him again. So instead, he smiled faintly and said, I'm not angry. And that became the first time Angelica managed to fool her husband, Raniello Actilis. Neither of them realized it yet. But at that very moment, their relationship had shifted ever so slightly, and the story within the novel had begun to change. Later, Angie cried out in relief. Earlier, she had been so terrified she thought Raniello might kill her before she even had a chance to escape. But clearly, he wasn't someone who would get angry just because she had been absent from her room. Perhaps it was because she met Eden, but why would that make him angry? To him, she was just another prey in his life, nothing more. Or maybe he had sensed that she was plotting something, but that was impossible. No one knew she was a reincarnator. Still, it was safer to stay close to him for a few days. That was her plan. Raniello, however, had something else on his mind. During one of their strolls, they happened to meet the knights from Tunia, who were out walking as well. The knights greeted the emperor respectfully and began conversing with him. while Eden stayed behind, carefully avoiding Raniello's eyes and not even glancing at Angie. Angie was relieved that he was behaving like they didn't know each other. She turned to Raniello. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should take our leave," she suggested softly, but Raniello had no intention of doing so. Wrapping his arm around her waist, he said with a faint smile, "Don't be so heartless, Duchess. We can't be rude to our guests." Then he turned back to continue chatting with the knights. As he spoke, his fingers lazily toyed with Angie's hair, the gesture appearing affectionate, almost tender. It made Angie uneasy. He used to touch her like this before, but never in front of others. Why now, she thought, her heart tightening with discomfort. On the other hand, Eden observed the scene quietly, looked a little confused. Angie had told him that the Emperor was dangerous, just like in the original story. But right now, Raniello looked nothing like the ruthless man she had described. At this moment, he appeared to be nothing more than an affectionate husband devoted to his wife. But only Angie knew that this affectionate version of him was far more terrifying and unpredictable than the one described in the original story. "Angie!" Raniello suddenly called out. She looked up. "Yes?" Without another word, he leaned in and pressed his lips against hers. The knights froze, stunned by the sudden display of affection, but Raniello's sharp eyes flicked toward Eden mid-kiss, clearly sending a message, marking his territory. When he finally pulled away, Angie caught her breath, her cheeks flushed. "Your Majesty, can we please go inside?" she said quietly. Raniello chuckled. "Looks like the Empress wants to spend some alone time with me," he said teasingly to the knights. "We should get going then." With that, he led Angie away, leaving the knights stunned in silence. Now Angie was certain that Raniello's gaze had been fixed on Eden the entire time. She suspected he might have overheard their earlier conversation. She needed to confirm it before it was too late. In a hurry, she wrote a letter to Eden and sent it through Suzanne. In the letter, she asked if he thought the Emperor might have heard them. Eden's reply was brief. He didn't think so. Angie's calm expression hardened. Frustrated, she tore the letter into pieces. This person who took over Eden's body really isn't that smart, she thought angrily. Meanwhile, Suzanne, standing nearby, had begun noticing how strangely her mistress had been acting since they arrived in Actilis. Ever since Angie's marriage was arranged back in Enro, she had cried for days, so much that Suzanne had chosen to accompany her to Actilis as her lady-in-waiting. But now, Angie seemed like a completely different person. With that worry weighing on her, Suzanne stepped forward. "Your Majesty, I would like to discuss something with you," she said softly. Angie immediately understood what she was thinking and replied calmly, "I know what you're thinking, but don't worry. I don't have any feelings for the Knight of Tunia." Suzanne's eyes welled up. "If it's not that, then why won't you tell me what's going on? You know, this has never happened between us," she said, almost in tears. "Oh, don't cry," Angie said, worriedly patting her shoulder. "I truly have no interest in that knight. What I'm interested in is actually the Saintess of Tunia. You remember I was reading books about Tunia even before the knights arrived, right? It was only half true, but it was better than a complete lie." "Then why not ask the Archbishop about the Saintess?" Suzanne suggested. Angie explained calmly. "Because I noticed that Knight doesn't seem to have any friends, and since he's been reading banned books, he's probably not that loyal to the temple. That means he might tell me more about the Saintess than the Archbishop would." Suzanne wiped her tears, nodding in understanding. "I see. I didn't know that. I'm sorry. It's fine," Angie said softly. "I have no intention of betraying my husband or flirting with another man." She didn't realize that, outside the room, Raniello was listening to every word. A faint smile tugged at his lips. He seemed almost relieved by her answer. "It feels like it was just yesterday when you cried because you didn't want to get married," Suzanne said emotionally. "And now, you're an empress beloved by everyone." Angie smiled. "Well, it was tough, but the Emperor has been quite kind to me." Raniello's smile widened slightly. "So, she thinks I've been kind to her," he thought with quiet amusement. "I hope you'll come to love this nation in no time," Suzanne added hopefully. "Well, that'll be true, if I don't get killed during the winter hunt," Angie replied with a sigh. Raniello flinched at the words winter hunt, then remembered what she was referring to and let out a soft chuckle. "She's worried about that, while I'd completely forgotten." As he turned to leave, he paused. "But why is she so interested in the Saintess of Tunia?" he wondered. "Maybe I should investigate that woman myself when I go on the expedition," he decided before walking away. That night, Raniello entered the room. "The moon is bright tonight," he said with a grin. Seeing him in a good mood, Angie smiled back. "Indeed it is," she replied. Raniello lay down with his head on her lap, idly playing with her hair. "You seem to be in a good mood today," he said casually. "Perhaps it's because you seem to be in one," Angie replied, scratching her cheek shyly. Raniello chuckled. "Does that make you happy?" "What else makes you happy?" he asked lazily, still twirling her hair between his fingers. Angie blinked, unsure why he was acting this way. He took her hand and placed it on his forehead. "Does he want me to pat him?" she wondered, then began gently stroking his head. "So, what else makes you happy?" he asked again, his voice calm but strangely intent. He was behaving oddly, and it made Angie uneasy. Why was he asking this? Did he really care about how she felt? No, Raniello only cared about his own feelings. Nothing else. When her hand paused mid-stroke, Raniello opened his eyes. "Why did your hand stop moving?" he asked quietly. Angie snapped out of her thoughts. See, she thought bitterly, he only notices things when they concern him. And what did she want? She wanted to tell him she wished to escape this place, and if he couldn't let her go, at least stop visiting her so often. But of course, she couldn't say that to the man lying before her, so instead she said softly, "Then, I want to join you on the monster hunt. That would make me happy. Can I?" Raniello looked at her for a long while, clearly not expecting that answer. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "Of course. If you want to come with me so badly, it's fine." Angie blinked, startled, not just because he agreed, but because of that smile. It was different. In the novel, Raniello was described as a demon, someone born with evil in his very core. But right now, the man before her looked so innocent, almost breathtaking. Without realizing it, Angie reached out and brushed her hand against his cheek. Am I really being charmed by his looks? She thought in a panic. Raniello wrapped his arms around her in a gentle embrace. Angie stiffened, reminding herself that this tenderness could vanish at any moment. He could turn back into that monster whenever his mood changed. This side of him wouldn't last. By tomorrow, he would surely go back to being Raniello Actilus, the cruel emperor again. But nothing happened as she expected. The next day, Raniello remained the same, affectionate and warm. Even when he argued with the archbishop, who was preparing to leave after Actilus's training concluded, the moment his eyes fell on Angie, his expression softened into that same smile, a smile that looked almost like love. Angie scratched her head in confusion. He was acting completely out of character, like a male lead from a romance novel, and although it should have been a good thing, he was still Raniello Actilus, which meant she needed to escape before he grew bored of her again. On the other hand, Raniello stared dazedly at the wine in his glass later that night. He couldn't understand why Angie wasn't honest with him. He had only wanted to know what made her happy, yet she never answered clearly. She always seemed uneasy, always avoided his eyes. He wondered what her carefree smile would look like, what it would feel like to see her laugh without fear. Then, a strange desire stirred inside him. He wanted her to fall in love with him. He chuckled at the thought. If she knew what I was thinking right now, he mused, she'd probably break down in confusion. Angie spent her days in the Actilus Imperial Library, searching through countless books, trying to find any clue related to the spell or the people from another world. But in the end, she found nothing. Maybe it had just been an accident. Her and Eden's arrival in this world. Their last hope now was to look in the abandoned sanctuary library, just as Eden had suggested. "You're reading all kinds of books lately," a familiar voice said suddenly behind her. Angie jumped in surprise. "Your Majesty, I just like reading all kinds of things," she said quickly, fumbling with the pages. Raniello smiled faintly and sat down beside her. "Is there anything in particular you want to see during the expedition?" he asked. Caught off guard by his question, Angie shook her head. "No, nothing in particular," she replied carefully. He leaned back in his chair, watching her. "Then, what about the Saintess who never leaves the temple?" he asked casually. At the mention of the Saintess, Angie froze. "Why are you suddenly bringing her up? Do you want to see her?" she asked nervously. Raniello tilted his head slightly, studying her face. He had thought mentioning one of her interests might make her happy, but her reaction surprised him. Still, he kept smiling, playing along. "And what if I do?" he said calmly. "No, you can't," Angie blurted out, panic rising in her voice. He raised an eyebrow. "If I'm really interested in meeting her, why would you stop me?" Angie looked down, fumbling with her hands. "Because she's very beautiful," she admitted softly. "And if you were interested in her, I'd be bothered." "So you mean," Raniello said with a faint smirk, "you would dare to try and stop me?" Angie flinched, shaking her head quickly. "No, of course not. If you want to see her, you can, but—" She hesitated. "But what?" he pressed, his tone teasing now. "You want to monopolize me?" No, how could I dare?" Angie stammered, her face pale with worry. "Well, that's not too bad," Raniello said suddenly, smiling wider. "Go on." "What?" she stuttered, looking at him in shock. He leaned closer, gently patting her head. "Angie, I said go on." Hesitantly, she finally spoke. "Then, during this expedition, I hope you won't pay any attention to the Saintess." Raniello's smile lingered as he looked at her. "All right," he said simply. Earlier, he had been wondering what kind of gift he could give her. But it turned out, granting this wish, something only he could do, was more than enough. About 10 days later, the monster hunting troops set out. Raniello rode his horse at the front, while he insisted that Angie travel in a carriage. Angie brought Suzanne and Sylvia with her. If she ever needed to run away, she would need people around her. Suzanne was her trusted maid, while Sylvia's reputation had fallen since the last hunting festival. Even if Sylvia discovered her plan, no one would believe her. After 3 days of traveling, they finally reached the mountains. As soon as the carriage stopped, Raniello appeared, offering his hand to help her down. "You like beautiful things, right?" he asked, surprised it took Angie a moment to respond. Yes, of course, she said softly. He smiled, taking her hand. Then let's go, he said, leading her away. They walked for about 20 minutes until they reached a secluded area. Ranello turned slightly toward her. You like sparkling things too, don't you? He asked, still smiling. Angie gasped as she looked around. The place shimmered in the moonlight. It was as if they had stepped into a dream. Everything around them sparkled. If you like it, then smile, Angie, Ranello said, a faint blush rising on his face. The man before her was known as the agent of God and the demon of the battlefield. He believed every human was beneath him, caring only for his own desires. And yet here he was, trying to make her smile. Angie's heart began to race. Does this mean I'm special? She asked quietly. You are special, Ranello said. I remember when you're troubled, when you cry, and when you're afraid. I remember all of it. But I don't know what you look like when you smile. It's rare to see you smile freely. His answer caught her off guard. He wanted to see her smile. You seem pleased, Ranello said, watching her closely. But you're still not smiling? The sky above them glittered, with countless stars that looked ready to fall like rain. The flowers around them swayed with the faintest breeze. It all felt like a dream. Overwhelmed by emotion, Angie reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. Ranello didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss. Startled, she didn't resist, as if she were under some spell. When they parted, Ranello whispered, Angie. Before she could respond, he gently pushed her down onto the bed of flowers. Leaning closer, he called her name again and again, softly, like a prayer. Angie looked up into his eyes. If this man wanted something, he could take it by force. He didn't need to call her name so tenderly. He had brought her here just to see her smile, as if her feelings actually mattered. That thought filled her with an emotion she couldn't name. Caught in that moment, she reached up and kissed him first, this time surprising him. When their lips parted, Ranello looked down at her. Angie, what else do you like? He asked, brushing her cheek. Peace, she answered honestly. I like peace. Ranello chuckled. Well, peace is boring, he said softly, lazily pulling at her dress as his hand slipped beneath the fabric. Maybe I'm too simple, or too sly, Angie thought, breathless beneath her husband. But maybe it's fine to be like this. When they finally reached the region near the Temple of Tunya, the village felt desolate. People peeked nervously from behind windows but didn't dare step outside despite the grand procession. Their fear of Actilus was obvious. At the temple gates, the archbishop greeted them with a polite smile, but Ranello replied coldly, Skip the formalities. I shall feed my knights. You only need to offer us a place to sleep. His tone was sharp, but Angie understood. The temple was struggling financially, and providing for so many soldiers would have been a burden. Even if his words sounded harsh, they were practical. Ranello then turned to her. I have a meeting with the captain of the Holy Order. Would you like to join me? Angie laughed nervously. No, it's fine. I'll wait and see you at supper, she said. Ranello smiled faintly and patted her head. What a pity, he said before turning away. Well then, I'll see you later, my empress. A pity, Angie murmured after he left. Now she had to admit, Ranello had changed. The once violent man seemed to truly like her. But she couldn't forget what was coming. Once he met the Saintess, Serafina, everything might change again. She needed to stay cautious. Her life was still at stake. She'd even told Susan to bring a bag of money, just in case she had to run away, but she hoped it wouldn't come to that. She hadn't yet figured out where to go. As she was deep in thought, someone suddenly grabbed her hand and covered her mouth. Angie froze, but then a familiar voice whispered, Don't make a sound. It was Eden. He quickly let her go, and as she turned around, he apologized. I'm sorry for grabbing you so suddenly. Angie, however, was relieved to finally see him. Actually, I was looking for you, she said quickly. Where is Serafina? Will we run into her during the expedition? She needed to know the Saintess's whereabouts as soon as possible. Eden shook his head. No, that won't happen. I made some changes. I don't want the original story to start too early either. So I suggested to the Archbishop that we send the Saintess out to visit the citizens. Her prayers will give them hope. That's a good idea, Angie said, genuinely impressed. You're smarter than I expected. Eden smiled faintly. Did you find anything in the Imperial Library? No, nothing, Angie said, shaking her head. There's not a single thing about souls coming from another world. Then the abandoned sanctuary library is our only option now, Eden murmured. Angie doubted they'd find anything there either, but she didn't want to discourage him. So, Eden asked, Are you going to stay here, or will you go with the expedition? Oh, I'll go with the expedition, Angie replied anxiously. I believe that's what the Emperor wants. Then, glancing around to make sure no one was nearby, she leaned closer and whispered, Eden? This might sound strange, but I think he likes me. Eden blinked, then nodded calmly. I already know that. What? You already know? Angie asked, shocked. Eden sighed. Well, when I saw you two in the garden that time, he looked like a man who wanted to brag about being your husband. Angie looked down. A lot of things are different from the original story, and that makes me nervous. I understand, Eden said, but if things really do change completely, if he doesn't seem interested in Serafina at all, will you stay here then? The question caught her off guard. She hadn't even considered that possibility until now. I think that's enough of an answer, Eden said, seeing her hesitation. Do you think I want to stay here? Angie asked, confused. Eden took her hands gently. Look, I understand if you do. For you, this world might be better than your original one. I'm not criticizing you, believe me. Angie nodded slowly. Even if I decide to stay here, I'll still help you find a way home, she said earnestly. Eden sighed. Then let's not prolong this meeting. We should split up now before anyone notices. That evening, during supper, Angie's mind kept returning to Eden's question. She had to assume that what he said wouldn't happen. That was the safer way to think. After all, this was Raniello she was dealing with. He could get bored of her at any moment. And even if she managed to handle the situation with Serafina, would that really be enough? Perhaps, if she had the answers to those questions, she might have been able to answer Eden earlier. After supper, Angie went to her assigned room. The bed was small, clearly meant for one person. Since this was the temple, everyone here lived alone. She sighed, then quickly flinched at her own reaction. Was I disappointed that my husband isn't here? She thought, confused. Sitting on the bed, she began to think. Maybe she did want to stay here. In her original world, she was poor and had no friends. She spent most of her time reading novels. But here, as Angelica Enro, she was a princess. Educated, respected, and surrounded by people. Still, there was no guarantee Raniello would like her forever. Leaving would be the safer option. As she was lost in thought, someone knocked on the door. Angie stood up, and to her surprise, it was Raniello, holding a tray of food in his hand. What is this? She asked, puzzled. This is for you. You barely ate anything at the table, he said with a faint smile. He came inside and sat down beside her, feeding her himself. Angie stared at him. This man, who had never done anything for anyone, was here feeding her. Yet despite his gentleness, the fear she felt for him didn't fade. And with that fear, she couldn't bring herself to give him her heart. After she finished eating, Raniello looked around the small room. The bed is small, he remarked. Yes, Angie replied. It's for one person. He leaned closer, brushing a strand of her hair between his fingers. That's exactly what I'm complaining about, he said softly. Angie's heartbeat quickened at the closeness. His hand moved from her hair to her cheek, gently caressing her skin. Her heart pounded so fast it felt like it might burst. Unable to take it anymore, she instinctively pushed him away. Raniello froze in shock, just staring at her. Angie, realizing what she had done, felt even more startled. Did I just reject him? She thought. The man who had never been refused by anyone in his life. She had just pushed him away. Desperate to ease the situation, she forced a nervous laugh. I was just joking, she said awkwardly. Raniello didn't respond. He only looked at her quietly. Angie, he said at last. She flinched. Of course, he didn't believe her excuse. I'm sorry, she said quickly, looking down. If I made you angry, I'm not angry, Raniello interrupted. What? Angie looked up slowly. He leaned forward and pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. I said I'm not angry, he repeated, hiding her face against his chest. So don't cry, and don't be scared. His voice was soft, reassuring. He truly didn't want her to be afraid of him anymore. As she stayed in his embrace, Angie could hear his heartbeat, steady and calm. And somehow she felt he really wasn't angry. The journey must be tiring, Raniello said quietly, lifting her into his arms. Go to sleep. Angie blinked slowly, her eyes growing heavy, and before she realized it, she drifted into sleep. That night, Angie had a dream. A woman appeared before her, carrying a covered dish. Angie took it and lifted the lid, only to find a severed head inside. Terrified, she pushed it away, and the head rolled to someone's feet. It was Raniello. He stood there laughing like a madman. Suddenly, the head spoke. Will you still stay here? Is this enough for you to decide? Angie froze. It was Eden's voice. She stumbled back, horrified. But before she could move further, the woman behind her caught her by the arms. Angie turned and saw her face. It was the Saintess of Tunya. Before she could react, Raniello appeared behind her and drove a blade slowly through her back. She turned to look at him. He was still laughing, calling her his winter prey. Angie gasped, choking, her vision fading. Just before everything went black, she saw Serafina mouthing something, but she couldn't hear the words. When she opened her eyes again, Raniello was hovering over her, calling her name. That's when she realized it had been a nightmare. Later, she noticed the red marks around her neck. It made sense now. Raniello had been holding her hand because she'd tried to choke herself in her sleep. But she had no time to dwell on it. Today, they were heading to the old sanctuary. She needed to forget that dream and focus. The archbishop informed her that they would reach the sanctuary by evening. It's close to the border, he explained. Currently, it's infested with monsters. You want to reclaim it? Angie asked. Yes, the archbishop replied. It will raise the morale of our people. The idea actually came from one of our youngest holy knights. Angie immediately realized he was talking about Eden. Of course, he had his own reasons for suggesting it, but that worked in her favor too. As they spoke, Raniello entered. "Empress, do you think you can travel?" he asked, his tone showing genuine concern. Angie understood. He was asking because of her nightmare last night. She turned to the Archbishop. "How long will it take to reach there?" "We'll arrive today," the Archbishop said. "But the expedition itself will last around 2 weeks." Angie thought quickly. If Raniello and his men went deeper into the mountains to fight the monsters, she could stay behind and visit the reclaimed sanctuary later, without worrying about him. "I'll stay here to rest, Your Majesty," she said calmly. "If I go, I'll only get in your way." Raniello raised a brow. "So you think you'd slow me down?" Panicking, Angie grabbed his hand. "No, that's not what I mean. I just want this to end quickly so we can return home, to Actilus." Raniello paused, as if he'd heard something unexpected. Then he turned away. "I'll be back as soon as possible," he said before leaving. After he was gone, Angie turned to the Archbishop. "May I enter the sanctuary once it's reclaimed? I'm interested in learning more about the God of Mercy," she said hopefully. The Archbishop hesitated but finally nodded. "Of course." Meanwhile, Raniello rode ahead with his troops. Behind his soldiers marched the holy knights, among them Eden. He glanced at the Emperor, who looked visibly displeased. Is it because the Empress didn't come along? He wondered. It was hard to believe, but Raniello's mood seemed entirely affected by her absence. It amazed Eden. The cold, merciless man from the original story, tamed by Angie? He could hardly believe it. But when they reached the border, the monsters attacked. Raniello, leading at the front, tore through them effortlessly, slaying each one as if it were nothing. Eden and the other knights could only watch, stunned. Is he even human? Perhaps he made his judgment too early. He was exactly as the novel described him to be, Eden thought. Then one of the monsters, half dead, began to move again. Did he miss? Eden wondered. But Raniello, standing ahead, chuckled darkly. His smile was cold, inhuman. "Advance," he ordered. The army obeyed, marching forward. The horses trampled over the still-living monsters, crushing them beneath their hooves. Eden finally understood. Raniello had left them half alive on purpose, just to make their deaths more brutal. This was the true Raniello, Actilus, the agent of Actilus, the demon emperor. And as he moved farther and farther away from Angelica, something dark within him began to awaken again. When they reached the old sanctuary, they found the area surrounded by countless monster eggs. "That must be why their scouts were so close by," Raniello smirked. Then he turned to the holy knights. "Have you ever seen a baby monster being born in front of your eyes?" The knights hesitated, startled by the question. "No, sir," one of them finally replied. Raniello laughed, tightening his grip on his sword. "Well, you'll witness it today." With that, the battle began. The monsters lunged from every direction, and the air filled with the sound of clashing steel. "Kill every one of them, but do not touch the eggs," Raniello ordered. The knights obeyed, cutting down the creatures without mercy. Eden flinched at the sight. First, Raniello had ordered them to slaughter the monsters ruthlessly, and now he wanted the eggs preserved. It was sickening. Is he out of his mind? Eden thought, disgust rising in his chest. One of the holy knights approached the Emperor. "Your Majesty, why are we trying to hatch the eggs? Wouldn't it be easier to destroy them now?" Raniello smirked. "But that's no fun," he replied flatly. Before anyone could respond, another knight ran up, panting. "Your Majesty!" One of the eggs hatched, but he hesitated before continuing. "It didn't attack us. If I may add, I think it sees us as its mother." Raniello's smirk widened. "Good. Now things are getting interesting." He turned to his soldiers. "Take turns guarding them until all the eggs hatch." The knights exchanged uneasy glances. One of them finally spoke up. "But, Your Majesty, if they all hatch and see us as their mother, they'll soon need to eat." Raniello laughed. "Right. The newborns must be hungry, then feed them." Everyone froze at his words. The meaning behind them was clear. Eden felt his stomach twist. Who's the real monster here, he thought bitterly. Later, it was Eden's turn to guard the hatching eggs. The sight disgusted him. He had never imagined he'd witness something so horrifying. Trying to distract himself, he decided to look around the sanctuary. The library he found was smaller than he expected. As he walked deeper inside, something caught his attention, a stone door at the far end. He approached it cautiously. The passage beyond looked narrow, too small for him to enter. But there was an inscription carved into the door's surface. "When the blood of Actilla is ready, open with the sword of Tunia." Eden frowned, reading it again. The blood of Actilla, that must mean the blood of Raniello, he thought. But the sword of Tunia? I've never heard of such an artifact. Maybe he could find clues in the library, or ask the Archbishop later. As he was lost in thought, a knight's voice startled him. "Hey, it's your turn for guard duty. The hatchlings are about to imprint." Eden turned. "All right, I'll be there," he said. The knight looked at him curiously. "But why were you staring at a blank wall?" Eden froze, then slowly glanced back. The stone door was still there, but to the knight it looked like an ordinary wall. "I don't know," he said quietly. The man chuckled awkwardly. "You're a strange one. Anyway, let's go." Eden nodded, following him, but he couldn't stop glancing back at that spot, unease crawling up his spine. Back at the temple, it had been 2 days since the army left, and news of the reclamation arrived, much sooner than Angie had expected. Some of the injured knights had already returned. Angie went to the medical camp, looking around for Cha Su-yeon, but he wasn't there. That was actually good news, she thought. If he wasn't here, it meant he wasn't injured. She then turned her attention to the soldiers lying on the beds. They looked pale, drained, and dazed. Was the reclamation that tough? Angie asked softly. Pardon, Your Majesty? One of the soldiers replied, startled. It's not exactly that. He hesitated, then continued. It's because of what the Emperor did. Angie frowned slightly. What do you mean? The soldier took a shaky breath. His Majesty took the monster eggs and ordered us to let the hatchlings imprint on us. Then, he fed the mother monster to them. A cold silence fell over the camp. Several people flinched at the words, their faces paling. Behind Angie, Sylvia trembled uncontrollably, her hands shaking. Angie immediately noticed. Suzanne, she said calmly, please stay here and assist the healers. I'll fetch refreshments for everyone. Then, gently taking Sylvia by the arm, she led her out of the camp. As they walked in silence, Sylvia finally spoke after some hesitation. Your Majesty, why are you so kind to me? She asked. I'm the daughter of a traitor. I begged for my life because I was too afraid to die. Angie smiled faintly. Then, do you wish for me to be harsh with you instead? Honestly, I thought you'd resent me, since my marriage caused your family's downfall. Sylvia shook her head quickly. No, not at all. If I were to resent anyone, it should be myself. Tears welled in Sylvia's eyes. Because I was the one who stabbed my own mother. When I heard about those monsters devouring their kin, it reminded me of that moment. Angie's expression softened. She reached out and patted Sylvia's shoulder. That's enough. You don't have to say more. At her touch, Sylvia broke down completely, sobbing in Angie's arms. Angie held her quietly, understanding the pain behind her words. If Sylvia was willing to show her vulnerability, it meant she trusted her. And that, Angie thought, was something precious. When Sylvia finally calmed down, Angie spoke softly. I'm sorry about His Majesty's cruel ideas. Sylvia shook her head. It's not your fault. I'm sure he does these things for his own amusement. But... She hesitated, then continued. I think His Majesty cares about you. Angie blinked, surprised. You think so? Sylvia nodded firmly. As one of the former candidates for his bride, I studied everything about him, and I've only ever seen him act considerate when it comes to you. Her tone suddenly darkened. Otherwise, he's the cruelest man I've ever seen. I've never met anyone like him. Angie's chest tightened. She grabbed Sylvia's shoulders and said firmly, Stop, Sylvia. Don't continue that thought. Don't dream of what you can't accomplish. Sylvia froze for a moment, then nodded weakly. I understand, Your Majesty. Angie let out a quiet sigh. I trust you won't do anything that will trouble me. I won't, Sylvia replied softly. Angie looked at her silently. She knew Sylvia harbored resentment toward Raniello, but revenge against him was impossible. If she ever tried, she'd only end up dead. The following day, Angie visited the reclaimed sanctuary with the Archbishop. The clergy members were busy cleaning the place, which was still littered with traces of battle. Just looking at the site, Angie could tell how brutal the fight must have been. It seems to be in rough shape, she said, climbing down from her horse. If only it had been recovered sooner. Oh, we didn't reclaim it until now because of the prophecy, the Archbishop explained. Angie blinked. The prophecy? From the god of Tunya? Yes, he replied. The god of mercy speaks through the saintess, but I can't tell you the details. It's strictly confidential, even within the temple. Angie nodded. It made sense now why the temple valued the saintess so highly. Now, let me show you the great library, the Archbishop said, leading the way. Are you sure it's all right for me to look through any of the books here? Angie asked as they entered. Of course, he said with a smile. All books that outsiders shouldn't see have already been moved to the current sanctuary. Angie froze for a second. That meant there were no forbidden texts left here. Still, she decided to take a look. Who knew what she might find? From that day onward, Angie visited the abandoned sanctuary every day. The books were old and difficult to read. Some had torn pages, faded ink, or damaged covers. Even after searching thoroughly, she found nothing useful. Then one day, she heard a soft thud behind her. Turning toward the sound, she saw a single book lying on the floor. There was no wind. It shouldn't have fallen on its own. Curious, she bent down and picked it up. The moment she saw the title, her eyes widened. The flower that blooms even in the abyss. Her hands trembled. It was the same novel she used to read in her original world. But how could it exist inside the novel's world itself? Heart racing, she flipped through the pages and saw the exact same story, the agent of Actilus meeting the Saintess of Tunya. That day, the Knights of Actilus faced an unexpected snowstorm and had to make a detour. Seraphina heard Tunya's god's voice informing her of a visit by an important guest. She hadn't noticed it earlier, but now, reading it again, she realized it was actually Tunya who encouraged Seraphina's encounter with Raniello. The Empress's head fell to the ground. and the long sword of the Emperor was drenched in blood. Reading those details made Angie tremble. Raniello made Serafina the new empress, blinded by obsession. She already knew all of this, but reading it now, after spending months with Raniello, everything felt different, almost unreal. In the end, Raniello died because of Serafina's revenge, and she was left alone with nothing. That was what was supposed to happen in winter. But there was something new. An author's note that hadn't been there in her original copy. There is one unchangeable truth in the world I created. The agent of Actilla will always be obsessed with the Saintess of Tunia. Even if everything else, characters, relationships, and circumstances, changes, this one fate will never alter. The words felt like they were mocking her. Angie's grip tightened. That bastard, she muttered under her breath. Suddenly, someone's presence loomed behind her. She turned with a start and gasped softly, but then froze. Why are you so surprised? Raniello asked, his voice calm. Only then did she notice he was still wearing his armor, which meant he had come straight to the library, looking for her, without even changing. He leaned closer, his gaze drifting to the book in her hand. What are you reading? Oh, it's some religious book, Angie lied quickly. He raised an eyebrow and snatched the book from her. Really? Then why did you just call it bastard a moment ago? Angie's heart raced. Would it be okay if he saw it? How was she going to explain this? Raniello began flipping through the pages, his brow furrowing. Is this a joke? You said it was a religious book. I'm sorry, I lied, Angie blurted, panicking. I don't even know what this book is about. Raniello frowned slightly, then looked back at her. Then why were you staring at blank pages? Angie froze. Blank pages? Raniello held up the book. Every page is empty, didn't you notice? Her blood ran cold. He couldn't see the writing. He handed the book back to her, smiling faintly. You must have been bored without me, staring at blank pages like that. Angie forced a shaky laugh. Yes, maybe that's it. I just had nothing to do. But inside, her thoughts raced. Why could only I see the words? As they walked out of the library, Raniello suddenly spoke again. Do you not remember what you said 10 days ago? Angie blinked, trying to recall. Then it came to her. She had told him she would wait for him so they could go home together. So that's why he had come, back early. She hurried forward and grabbed his hand. We can go back home now, right? Raniello chuckled softly. You're a bit slow, Empress, he said, amusement flickering in his eyes. That night, Angie sat on Raniello's lap, her hands resting lightly on his chest. Did you have fun during the expedition? She asked softly. Raniello smirked. Well, it wasn't bad, he said. He then described, almost casually, how his strategy made the hatchlings taste their own kind without hesitation, and how effective it had been. It's a pity you weren't there to witness it. A chill ran down Angie's spine. The cruelty of his words made her stomach twist. Even though she knew his methods were frighteningly efficient, she could only imagine what Soo-hyun must have gone through fighting beside this man. But as she looked at him, so close, so possessive, she realized something unsettling. Now that Raniello liked her, escaping him would be even harder. She couldn't trick him easily anymore. If she tried to distance herself, he would sense it immediately, see through her lies. So she had to play her part, love him sincerely until winter came. The next morning, Raniello announced they would leave for Actilis the next day. Angie hadn't expected him to decide so soon. She still hadn't had a chance to speak with Eden since Raniello had barely left her side. She was left with no choice. As Raniello spoke with the knights, she quickly turned to Sisan. Give this book to the Holy Knight, she whispered, and tell the palace will return soon. She knew Raniello's eyes followed her every move, but she couldn't show fear. Giving orders to her maid was normal. It wouldn't arouse suspicion. Sisan obeyed and handed the book to Eden later that day. Eden sighed with relief upon receiving it. He too had wanted to contact the Empress. But Sisan didn't look pleased. Angie had told her about her plan to escape with the Holy Knight, and had even sent some money through her. Sisan couldn't understand why her mistress would want to run away now. She seemed to be adjusting well with the Emperor. Eden opened the book but frowned. The pages were empty. He couldn't see any text. However, there was a note from Angie explaining what the book was and mentioning the author's note she had discovered. Understanding, he closed it and handed it back. Thank you for helping me. But tell your mistress the book is blank. Suzanne's jaw tightened. What is your relationship with Her Majesty? She asked sharply. Eden looked startled. Don't worry, he said quickly. We're not in any kind of relationship. Then why did she say she would run away with you in December? Suzanne demanded. Eden hesitated, then answered honestly. To be truthful, I thought she would stay in Actilis. But if she's decided to leave, that's for the best. Why? She's finally getting along with His Majesty. He even adores her, Suzanne protested. Eden exhaled heavily. That's only for now. Seeing she wasn't convinced, he added, there was a prophecy that the Emperor would kill both your mistress and me in the future. Suzanne froze. A prophecy from the god of Tunia? Eden shook his head. No, it came from another being. But both your mistress and I received it at the same time. That's why when I visited Actilis, she recognized me immediately and approached me. In short, we share the same fate, and since the Emperor seems obsessed with her now, she's restricted. She can't act freely. Suzanne was overwhelmed, her heart heavy with worry. To communicate further, Eden added gently, "Tell your mistress not to worry. I'll be coming to Actilis soon." The next day, the morning of departure arrived. The Archbishop thanked the Emperor for his help, but Raniello's eyes were fixed on Angie, who was speaking quietly with Cézanne. "I heard about the prophecy, Your Majesty," Cézanne said softly. Angie froze for a moment, then understood. It must have been Eden's excuse to convince her. "You understand now why I made this decision, right?" Cézanne nodded. "I do. But the knight said the book was blank for him too." Angie's eyes widened. Blank for him too? She thought Raniello couldn't see it because he wasn't a reincarnate. But if Eden couldn't see it either, then why could only she? Cézanne then hesitated. "There's one more thing. The knight asked me to tell you. He wanted to know if you saw any kind of door when visiting the library." Angie frowned. "A door?" "Yes," Cézanne said. "He mentioned it might not be visible to everyone." Angie shook her head slowly. "I didn't see any door." Her thoughts spiraled. "He can't see the book. I can't see the door. What does this mean?" "Empress," Raniello's voice broke through her thoughts. "It's time to leave," he said with a small smile. Angie took a deep breath and walked toward him, placing her hand in his. Whatever was happening, she'd have to think about it later. For now, she had to return to Actilis. It was now October in Actilis, a rare stretch of peaceful days. But after the monster hunt, Angie often woke in the middle of the night, trembling from nightmares. Each time, Raniello was there, gently shaking her awake. "What did you dream about?" he would ask quietly. But she lied to him every time. "I don't know," she would whisper, tears streaming down her cheeks. Raniello knew she was lying. Although she wasn't as afraid of him as before, if he wanted to, he could easily dig deeper. But whenever he saw tears in her eyes, he chose not to ask. Instead, he simply held her in his arms, calming her down and keeping her safe. He was restraining himself, trying to maintain the peace she wanted, believing they could stay like this forever. A few days later, Cézanne prepared to leave the palace. "I hope you rest comfortably." "Tonight, Your Majesty," she said with a polite bow. "I will." "See you tomorrow morning," Angie replied with a smile. "I thought you relied on her a lot," Raniello said from the side. "Didn't think you'd let her go." "Oh, I've given her a new home to stay in," Angie explained smoothly. "Countess Nirma suggested it would be better politically if Cézanne lived outside for a while." "You made the right choice," Raniello said, nodding approvingly. Angie smiled faintly. Outwardly, this was a smart political move. By sending Cézanne out, she'd strengthen her ties with other nobles beyond Duchess Nirma. But her true motive was far different. Raniello studied her face. "Do you feel lonely?" he asked softly. Angie laughed, leaning into his arms. "Of course not. As long as you're with me, I have no reason to feel lonely." Raniello smiled, patting her head affectionately. He'd grown unusually gentle with her lately. "Your Majesty," she said after a pause, "may I visit Cézanne's new home tomorrow?" "Of course," he replied without hesitation. "But you can't stay the night." "All right," Angie said sweetly. "I'll be back before sunset." Outside the palace, Cézanne arrived at her new residence. A few servants greeted her politely. "Welcome home, Lady Cézanne," one of the maids said. "Thank you," she replied, nodding before heading to her room. Among the servants was a man named Daniel. After Cézanne retired for the night, Daniel excused himself as well. As he left, one of the maids glanced after him curiously. He was different. His posture, his voice, even his manner of speech didn't suit a servant. And he had been given his own private room, something unheard of for common staff. But no one in the house knew the truth. Daniel was no ordinary servant. He was the holy knight from the Temple of Tunia, Eden, hiding under a false name. And this quiet home, gifted by the Empress, was no coincidence. Angie had deliberately arranged it. Cézanne's move outside the palace wasn't just for politics, it was to create a safe place to hide the knight. And in that very house, away from the Emperor's eyes, the Empress of Actilis was about to begin plotting her secret plan to run away, with her most trusted maid and the holy knight by her side. Eden confessed to the crime of being tempted by the saintess, just so he would be exiled intentionally. In this world, the title of an exiled holy knight was not something one could escape from. From that alone, Angie could see his determination to return to their world. Though it was a little frightening, he was willing to do anything, but still, he was far less terrifying than the Emperor. Right now, Raniello's attention was entirely on Angie, so he didn't even suspect her plan to send Cézanne away. When Angie arrived at Cézanne's house, Cézanne quickly drew the blinds so their discussion could go smoothly. Soon after, Eden entered. "Greetings. It's been a while," he said. "Have you been well?" Angie asked. "Yes, though you look exhausted," he said, setting a tray down. "We don't have much time left before Raniello leaves for the expedition, and Cézanne conveyed your message to me," Angie began. Eden nodded, realizing what she meant. "Actually, there's more out the door that I didn't tell you," he admitted. "I was planning to discuss it after I'd organized my thoughts. But before that, let's talk about you first." "About me?" Angie asked. "It seems the Emperor is quite fond of you." "He might try to take you with him," Eden said carefully. Angie shook her head. "It's all right. I haven't been well lately, and he's aware of that, so he won't take me. I'm planning to ask him to let me leave the palace to recover. I don't think he'll stop me." I see, Eden said thoughtfully, and you'll escape from there once the Emperor is away. Angie nodded. But I'm not sure where to go. Maybe he won't care about me once he falls for Serafina, but it won't be the same for others. If I'm found, they'll send me back to the palace. In that case, what about the Temple of Tunia? Eden suggested. Angie froze. Are you out of your mind? What if I run into him there? Calm down, Eden said calmly. The Temple of Tunia isn't under Actilus's control yet, and it's close by. Besides, we'll have to go there eventually, because the door is in the old sanctuary. Suzanne, standing to the side, now looked completely lost about what they were discussing. Think about it, Eden continued. In the original story, Raniello invades other nations first. Then, because of the weather, he's forced to pass through Tunia on his way back. So you're saying we should go there before Raniello does? Angie asked. Yes. The god of Tunia will protect us. He won't help the Emperor, Eden replied. All right, Angie said quietly. Then what is it you didn't tell me about the door? Eden exhaled. There were words written on it. When the blood of Actila is ready, open with the sword of Tunia. I've been thinking about what the sword of Tunia could mean. There's no holy artifact or weapon like that in the temple. But from what you read in the book, I came to one conclusion. It's Serafina. She's most likely the sword of Tunia, because in the original story, only her sword could cut through Raniello. Angie frowned. So we must contact her before Raniello reaches Tunia. And, once the blood of Actilis is spilled, we take her to the old sanctuary and open the door? Eden nodded. Exactly. The blood of Actilis, Angie murmured. That means Raniello has to die for it. Eden scratched the back of his neck. Well, I'm not sure if it requires death, but at least his blood must be spilled. Are you unhappy about that? Angie hesitated, no words coming out. She would be lying if she said that it didn't bother her, and Raniello was the god of Actilis. Unlike Tunia, there was no divine being there. He was the god himself. Finally, she said quietly, no. What matters is my life. I won't let my judgment be affected. Eden gave her a long look. She was a bad liar. You love him, don't you? Angie's lips curved faintly. Is it that obvious? He sighed. Since it's obvious to you, it must be obvious to him too, Angie continued. To avoid suspicion, I have to love him sincerely. I must call this place my home and act like I belong. But don't worry. In the end, my life is more important than anything. Eden watched her for a moment before sighing. We'll see if that love is just necessity, or an excuse to protect yourself. Eden? Angie asked suddenly. You're from a rich family, aren't you? He blinked. Why do you ask? To you, this world must feel inferior to your original one, she said quietly. Maybe that's why you're so determined to return. She turned toward the door, pausing for a moment before glancing back. So when I get conflicted, keep this in mind. Perhaps a rosy future is waiting for you there, but that's not the case for me. Time was passing quickly. In about a month and a half, if everything went according to the novel, Raniello would leave for his expedition, with the first stop being the Samvinia kingdom. So Angie decided to study the routes in advance. Why are you looking at that? Sylvia asked from the side, puzzled. I want to study the map, that's all, Angie replied with a small smile. Sylvia still found it strange, but before she could question further, Raniello walked in. You two seem to be getting close. What were you talking about? He asked. Angie quickly stood to greet him. Oh, nothing. I was just studying the map. Map? Why? Raniello asked, genuinely curious. I wanted to be a bit more informed about the current events, she answered carefully. Oh, is that so? Raniello said, seating her back down. Then why don't you tell me your thoughts? Angie steadied herself and began. This road connects Samvinia to Actilis. If we station our soldiers here, we can set up our base. But winter will make it difficult. Nobody starts a war in winter, so their guard will be down. If we break through their walls, we can take over quickly. Actilis soldiers are stronger and better at enduring harsh weather, so we can use that advantage to push forward. Raniello listened intently, then laughed. That's why we've been recording weather changes for the past years. If this year follows the same pattern, victory will be ours. Angie clenched her hands softly. She knew, according to the original novel, that this year would bring harsher weather than usual. But how do you know so much? Raniello asked, surprised. Oh, it's just... I wanted to understand what you were thinking, so I studied a little, she replied nervously. Raniello, excited, leaned forward. Then let me show you my destinations. When will you be leaving? Angie asked. Early December. So, you'll be busy soon, she murmured sadly. You don't want me to go? He asked. Oh no, it's not that, Angie said quickly. Then she wrapped her arms around his. Waste. I'll be fine. Just come home soon. I'd like to take you with me, though, Raniello added. She shook her head. You know how it was for me last time. I don't think it's a good idea for me to come. Raniello nodded. As expected, he didn't question her further. Later, in late spring, Duchess Nirma announced her pregnancy. The maids congratulated her warmly. When Raniello walked into the chamber, he overheard them. You're pregnant? He asked. Yes, Duchess Nirma received good news, Angie said gently. I see, he murmured. After everyone left, Raniello lay down on Angie's lap. Why was everyone acting so dramatic? He sighed. Duchess Nirma has been trying since the beginning of spring. It's normal to be happy when one's efforts finally pay off, Angie explained. He looked up at her. Do you also want a child? His sudden question startled her. No, Your Majesty, she answered after a pause. He sat up laughing. Well, if you do want one someday, you'll have to bear many children. Because of Actilus's test? Angie asked nervously. That's correct, he confirmed. Actilus' custom demanded that children fight each other to determine the next heir. Raniello had done the same at 13. Then only one child I bear will survive. But what if my child takes your life too, just like you did to your father? Angie whispered. Raniello's sharp gaze snapped toward her. He leaned over her, pushing her gently onto the bed. Unfortunately, no one can kill me. This is Actilus. The weak must perish, even if they're my children, he said with a soft smile that contrasted the coldness of his words. Angie's breath trembled. Then what about me? She asked quietly. I'm weak too. Do I also deserve to perish? Raniello's smile faded. You are mine, he said softly. So it is my right to decide whether you live or die. Then his lips curved into a dangerous smile. And if anyone dared to take your life, they would pay for their arrogance. He finished, untying his bow, his fingers gathering her dress. Angie smiled faintly. All right, as you wish. As he pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, a disturbing thought flickered through him. If he broke her now, would he ever be able to hold her like this again? The uncertainty made him restless. On the other side of the palace, the maids who stepped out were murmuring excitedly. To them, the emperor and empress seemed deeply in love. His Majesty was visiting the Empress Palace every day, after all. But behind them, Sylvia's mind was racing with entirely different questions. Now that the emperor was in the empress's chambers, he would not leave until morning. This was her one chance to investigate the things she had been doubting for weeks. Ever since Angie's head lady-in-waiting suddenly moved out of the palace, Sylvia had found it strange. Even though the empress had successfully convinced others, Sylvia still found the situation suspicious. So late at night, taking advantage of the emperor's absence, she headed straight to Suzanne's new house. She looked up. A single room still had its lights on, even at this late hour. Through the window, she saw a man sliding the covers aside and revealing his face. Suzanne's eyes widened behind the window frame. Even though his clothing and hairstyle had changed, she recognized him instantly. A holy knight of Tunia. What was he doing there? Inside, Eden, who had unknowingly shown himself, swiftly covered the window and ran to Suzanne's room. Your colleague is outside the house, he said the moment she opened the door. What do you mean? Suzanne asked, alarmed. I don't know her name, but I've seen her in the palace. If she sees us together, this could create a problem, Eden said, clearly annoyed with himself. With no choice left, Suzanne and Eden stepped outside. And there stood Sylvia. Suzanne immediately pulled her inside the house. I knew something was suspicious. But what are you doing here? She demanded, turning to Eden. Both Suzanne and Eden froze. Neither knew how to handle this. Aren't you two going to say anything? Sylvia asked coldly. What do you want? Eden asked. Tell me what you're planning. Eden rubbed the back of his neck. We're not planning anything. Then why are you here? Sylvia pressed. I was exiled. I just happened to find a job here. Sylvia grabbed him by the collar before he could finish. Don't lie to me. Her glare was fierce. Eden's brows furrowed. This woman had an unexpectedly strong presence for a palace maid. Suzanne tried to calm the situation, but things had already spiraled too far. Fine, Sylvia said at last. Then I'll reveal my intent first, so you can understand. She inhaled sharply and lowered her voice. Whatever Her Majesty is planning, I don't intend to stop her. Her tone darkened. In fact, I despise the Emperor. Everything he does for a moment of amusement becomes a tragedy for others. So I'm telling you clearly, I am on your side. I will do anything for Her Majesty. Because right now, she is the only one who can push him into hell. Suzanne trembled at the conviction in her voice. But the Empress loves the Emperor, Eden argued. Sylvia laughed, sharp and bitter. She can't love him. She might be attracted to him, but seducing him is the only way to survive. But wouldn't the Emperor notice if she was acting? Eden asked. Not right now, Sylvia replied. He's head over heels for her. It's difficult for him to doubt anything she says. Eden sighed deeply. Fine. I'll be honest with you then. Hey, are you sure? Suzanne whispered, panicked. But Eden had already made up his mind. The Empress and I are planning to leave Actilus. Sylvia's eyes narrowed. And after you leave, Eden's gaze sharpened. We will kill the Emperor. If their plan succeeded, the Emperor would die at the hands of the woman he loved. Then they would simply return to where they came from. The plan was simple, brutally simple. Back at the palace, Angie was curled up peacefully in her husband's arms. Your Majesty, she whispered softly. While you're away on your expedition, may I leave the capital for a while? Why? Raniello asked. When you're not here, no one will be on my side when I have nightmares. I'd rather go somewhere quiet for fresh air, but I promise I won't go far. Is there a place you have in mind? He asked. Yes, the country of Docino. Angie sat up a little, eyes brightening. And I believe the Countess there will treat me kindly. Her voice was smooth, so gentle and sweet that no man could deny her in that moment. "Aren't you sweet as candy?" Raniello murmured, leaning closer. "So sweet I keep wanting to give you everything." She sank back onto the bed, teasing, "But what if I melt and disappear?" Raniello hovered over her with a soft smirk. "That's fine," he whispered. "If you melt, I'll melt with you." The next day, Raniello sat in his chamber, attending his meeting, though his mind kept drifting back to his empress. "What would your majesty like to do?" one of the ministers asked. Raniello blinked back to the present. "The expedition will proceed as planned. No changes," he ordered. With that, the meeting concluded. As the officials filed out, his eyes landed on a man he couldn't immediately place. A crease formed on his brow. Who was that again? Then it hit him. Angie had told him about Duchess Nirma's pregnancy. This must be her husband, Duke Nirma. "I heard your wife is pregnant," Raniello said suddenly. Duke Nirma stiffened, startled by being personally addressed by the emperor, but he quickly bowed. "Yes, your majesty. She is." "Are you happy?" Raniello asked. "Do you love your wife?" The duke smiled softly. "Yes, I am happy, and I love my wife." Raniello leaned forward, curious. "And how do you know that you love her?" Duke Nirma answered carefully. "When I treat her differently, when she becomes exceptional to me. And love makes one accept things they otherwise would not welcome." Raniello's lips curved faintly. "So that makes me exceptional too?" "That's pleasant to hear." Meanwhile, Angie continued her training. Soon she would leave for her trip. As she adjusted her stance, she felt arms wrap around her from behind. "You shoot quite well now," Raniello murmured. Angie jumped slightly. "Your Majesty, when did you—" But before she finished, Raniello tilted her chin and claimed her lips in a sudden kiss. "You're going to Docino, right?" he asked, smoothing her hair. "Will you be all right without me?" Angie nodded quickly. "There are no mountains this time, unlike the last expedition. I'll be fine. I should send more people with you," he insisted, "so you can stay comfortable." Angie shook her head. "No, then I'll be uncomfortable. I'm going to rest, so I'll take only the people I trust, and a servant to carry the luggage. I think I'll have fewer nightmares with familiar faces." She knew Raniello would send someone to watch her, but it would be fine as long as they weren't right by her side. The weather grew colder. Actilis soldiers armed themselves, preparing for the emperor's campaign. By then, Angie also finished her preparations for her trip to Docino, scheduled before the army's departure. "Then I'll be off now," Angie said, as her carriage was prepared. Raniello nodded. "All right, I'll see you soon, once everything is over." Angie stepped inside the carriage, waving goodbye as it pulled away. Raniello remained standing there for a long moment, watching the carriage grow smaller in the distance. Then he turned back, determined to conquer Samvinia as quickly as possible, so he could return to his wife. Upon arriving in the country of Docino, the countess there welcomed Angie warmly. Countess Docino had long been trapped in an unhappy marriage. Her husband had cheated on her, her son had gone overseas to escape their constant fights, and if not for the emerald mine she inherited from her father, she might have been banished long ago. So for her, the Empress's visit was an opportunity for redemption, determined not to annoy or irritate the Empress. Duchess Docino made sure to take extra care of her. During dinner, her gaze instantly recognized the maid at Angie's side, but the man beside them, she had never seen before. Handsome, calm, unreadable. Beside his name, Daniel, nothing else was known. He must have earned the Empress's trust to accompany her here. As she studied him, his eyes suddenly met hers. Flustered, she looked away, yet somehow her gaze kept drifting back to him. The man, surprised at first, gave her a faint smile, and that smile was even harder to ignore. Duchess Docino's cheeks warmed, and as the dinner continued, their eyes kept meeting. Her blush only deepened. But this reaction was expected. Duchess Docino had been living in loneliness ever since her husband's affair began. So according to their plan, she would naturally be the one most willing to fall for a young man's quiet, intentional seduction. Late that night, inside Duchess Docino's chamber, her voice drifted in a low whisper. "So, was it Daniel? Your name?" Her fingers traced along a man's solid chest. Beneath her, Eden lay on the bed, looking up at her calmly. "I noticed you were looking at me during dinner," she added, her voice soft but tinged with suspicion. "Were you planning this from the beginning?" Eden's lips curved faintly. "Aren't you the one who called me into your room?" he replied. Duchess Docino leaned over him, her face slowly descending toward him. "It doesn't matter now, does it?" she murmured, closing the distance between them. Much later, exhausted from their entangled night, the Duchess fell asleep in a deep slumber. Eden, however, quietly rose from the bed and began searching through her drawers. After a few moments, he finally found what he came for, the keyring to Duchess Docino's mansion. By morning, Duchess Docino discovered her keys were missing. She searched the entire chamber, growing increasingly frantic. Her first suspicion immediately fell on the young man she had spent the night with. Just as she was about to storm out in anger, Angie approached with her maid beside her. "Oh, Duchess Docino, I was looking for you," Angie said gently. The Duchess turned and froze when Angie lifted her hand, revealing the keyring she had been searching for. "Why does the Empress have it?" The Duchess blinked, bewildered, but before she could ask anything, Angie explained with a calm smile. I found it yesterday when you took off your coat. I didn't want to embarrass you in front of the servants for such a small mistake, so I kept it with me for the moment. I'm returning it now. Duchess Docino remembered losing it, but still, why would the Empress ever steal something? Relief washed over her, and she thanked Angie sincerely. Angie smiled back. Her plan was progressing exactly as intended. They had chosen Docino for 2 reasons. First, traveling from here made it possible to reach Tunia without crossing the mountains. Second, Duchess Docino's limited authority and desperate desire to please the Empress made her easy to guide. During the tea, Angie sighed lightly. This place is lovely, but I feel a bit uncomfortable having so many unfamiliar people around me, she said. Duchess Docino's face drained of color. You were uncomfortable all this time? She asked, horrified. Angie quickly shook her head. Oh, I'm not blaming you, it's just... I prefer some solitude, being surrounded by only a few people I trust. Duchess Docino suddenly stood from her seat, eager. Then, I have a very quiet vacation home you might enjoy. Oh, really? Angie asked with a bright smile. A perfect reaction. The bait had been taken effortlessly. This had all been planned. Thanks to Cézanne and Eden's advanced research, they knew everything about the vacation home. All they needed was for Duchess Docino to offer it herself. After expressing her gratitude, Angie set out with the Duchess, and soon they arrived. The vacation home was secluded, close to the border, far from citizens, and perfect for their purposes. I hope you enjoy your stay, Duchess Docino said, pleased that her property was useful to the Empress. Yes, thanks to you, Angie replied softly. Then, with a gentle smile, she added, You can leave the keys with me. Duchess Docino blinked. Pardon? Angie tilted her head. Didn't I say I needed time with only the people I trust? I hope you understand. The Duchess looked at her, helpless. What choice did she have? No one refuses the Empress. Slowly, she nodded. Angie's smile curved, so strikingly similar to her husband's that it sent a chill through the Duchess. Thank you for your understanding. As everyone finally left, Sylvia closed the door behind her. It's finally just the 4 of us, she said, almost looking pleased with herself. Angie glanced at her. Sylvia really did seem to be enjoying this. When Eden insisted on including Sylvia in their plan, Angie had hesitated. But Sylvia's resentment toward the Emperor was genuine, so Angie chose to trust her. Okay, let's rest for a bit, Eden advised, and the group exhaled in relief. Angie slumped back onto the sofa, finally able to drop her Empress facade. Now that she thought about it, she was never meant for this role. Once they left this place, the next part of their plan required convincing Serafina, something Eden would have been better suited for. But because he was exiled for having impure thoughts about the Saintess, Angie would have to do it herself. Back at the Actilus mansion, Raniello arrived at the Empress's palace again, just as he had every day. The maids whispered behind him, The Empress isn't here. But he still comes and sleeps here every night, right? As expected, the room was empty. He knew she wasn't here, yet he kept returning anyway. Meanwhile, at the vacation home, Angie turned to Cézanne. Cézanne, I need to ask something before we leave tonight. Yes, my lady. Anything, Cézanne replied. Please bring me a pen and paper. I'm going to write one last letter, Angie said, with a small smile. She began writing, I have arrived safely at Docino County, Your Majesty. Everyone here treats me very comfortably. Perhaps because of the change in weather, I'm not having nightmares recently. I hope I will recover soon, and when your expedition is over, I want to begin my training again to prepare for the winter hunt. I will become the best winter prey for you, Your Majesty. Raniello read the letter with a faint smile. He was heading toward the Sambinia Mountains and decided that on his way back, he would visit his wife before returning to the capital. Back at the vacation home, the 4 of them divided into 2 teams. Eden and Angie would cross the gate after sunset. Angie packed her belongings while anxiety pricked her chest. Eden had stolen the gate pass from Duchess Docino earlier. But what if someone recognized her? Cézanne placed her hand over Angie's trembling ones. Everything will be all right. I'll meet you again in Tunia, she assured. Angie hugged her tightly, grateful and regretful that she never told Cézanne she wasn't the Angelica she adored. At night, Eden and Angie prepared their horses. Cézanne and Sylvia stood by, reassuring her. With their encouragement, Angie mounted her horse. If everything went well, she would never see them again. As they approached the gate, anxiety clawed at her, but Eden remained calm. Angie felt sick. Throw up after we get through the gate, Eden muttered. Raniello was bad, but this man wasn't much better, Angie thought bitterly. Ahead stood 8 guards, 4 inside, 4 outside. No matter how much she trained, even with a holy knight beside her, fighting 8 head-on was impossible. Show your pass and identify yourselves, the guard demanded. Eden handed over the stolen pass and introduced himself as someone from the south, traveling north to fetch his mother. The guard pointed at Angie. And her? She's my wife, Eden replied confidently. Behind him, Angie trembled, praying silently. What's your occupation? The guard pressed. I'm a merchant, Eden said. The guard scoffed. Do I look like a fool? What kind of merchant talks like that? Are you criminals? Angie noticed something odd. Even though he was suspicious, he wasn't calling the other guards or raising an alarm. That meant, "Honey," she cut in softly. "These gentlemen are working hard to protect us at such a late hour. Why not show them some respect?" The guard chuckled. "Your wife's smarter than you." Understanding her hint, Eden offered Angie's gold bracelet. "Thank you for your dedication." The guard inspected it, confirmed it was real, and stepped aside. The gate opened. Eden and Angie passed through, free at last. Tears streamed down Angie's face. After days of struggling to survive, she was finally free. Eden turned back, but Angie shouted, "Don't look back, let's just keep going." And so, they rode farther and farther from Actilus, toward freedom. At Docino's vacation home, a sharp knock echoed at the door. Sisan opened it just enough to see a man from the Docino mansion peering inside. "Is the Empress here?" he asked, trying to look past her shoulder. "You're not allowed to see her. Just deliver whatever you brought and leave," Sisan replied coldly before shutting the door right in his face. The man blinked, stunned. What an arrogant maid, he thought bitterly as he walked away. Inside, Sisan finally exhaled in relief. "What did he say?" Sylvia asked. "He was asking about the Empress," Sisan answered. Sylvia nodded. "That's actually good. If he's checking on her, it means the Empress really escaped without getting caught." Sisan and Sylvia had already decided to stay for another week to create a solid alibi for the Empress. When they left after that week, Docino would think the Empress had only just departed, never guessing that she had already escaped days earlier. Sisan also recalled how the Empress had urged them to run away for their own safety, but the maids had their own plan. Meanwhile, on the road, Eden and Angie took a short rest. "From now on, we should conserve our energy," Eden advised. "But what about your exile?" Angie asked, curious. "A lot of time has passed. It shouldn't be too difficult, now," Eden said calmly. "I wonder what Serafina will think," Angie murmured. "Don't dwell on Serafina," Eden warned. "The more you care, the harder it will be to use her when the time comes. And don't think about the Emperor either, especially if you're still fond of him." Angie hesitated, then whispered, more to herself than him, "I won't regret what I did. It can still hurt," Eden replied quietly. "Whether you regret it or not." Angie didn't answer. He was right. Her heart still pounded whenever she thought of him. Night deepened. They lit a fire. Suddenly, Angie stiffened at a faint sound. "Grab your sword," she whispered, already raising her bow. Before Eden could react, 3 bandits burst from the darkness. Angie spun, loosing an arrow, striking one immediately. The man fell with a scream. The remaining 2 cursed her and charged. Eden engaged one, and the other lunged for him. Angie shot again, but the attacker managed to graze Eden's arm with his blade. Later, Angie wrapped bandages around Eden's wounded hand. "How did you notice them?" Eden asked. "I've become sensitive after living in Actilus for so long," she replied. Eden stood. "We should move. Let's get to Tunia as fast as possible." Angie nodded and followed him. The dead bodies on the ground no longer frightened her, but she still feared the nightmares they might bring. Back at the Docino mansion, the Countess read a letter from the Empress. The Empress claimed she was too ill to receive visitors and didn't want the Countess to see her in such a poor state. Countess Docino felt anxious. She wanted to tell the Empress it didn't matter, but what if her reply offended her? In the end, she decided to wait a week before asking to meet her again. Meanwhile, Sisan and Sylvia executed their escape plan. They first exchanged the Empress's jewelry for cash, though they had the gate pass Eden had given them. They chose instead to escape through a resident-only secret passage. This way, even if Actilus soldiers chased after them, their trail would lead nowhere near the Empress's path. Far away, on the expedition trail, Raniello jolted awake from a dream. In it, Angie had whispered, "I love you, Your Majesty," with a smile. He sat up abruptly. He had never dreamed anything like that before. But then a cold, dangerous presence loomed behind him. "Forget her," a voice hissed. Raniello's eyes widened. "All you need to remember is blood, war, screams. Show me something entertaining," the voice demanded. Slowly, Raniello's expression twisted, lips curling into a dark grin. He stepped out of his tent. The army marched toward Samvinia. He had been deliberately slowing their journey, letting frustration and bloodlust build. By the time they arrived, they would be ravenous for war. "From the shadows," the voice murmured with satisfaction. "Now that the girl is gone." He's obedient again, isn't he? On the other side, Countess Docino, who had just uncovered the truth, arrived at Duchess Nirma's palace in a panic. "We've been fooled," she cried. "They used us." Duchess Nirma blinked, confused. "What are you talking about? They just disappeared. What am I supposed to do now?" Countess Docino murmured, tears rolling down her cheeks. Duchess Nirma grabbed her shoulders firmly. "Calm down and speak clearly. What happened? Is something wrong with the Empress?" "The Empress—" She ran away, Countess Docino whispered, her voice trembling. All color drained from Duchess Nirma's face. "Are you in your right mind?" "I'm telling the truth," the Countess insisted. Duchess Nirma's expression hardened. "Then we need to catch the Empress before the Emperor returns. The milkman discovered it this morning," Countess Docino said, hands shaking. but I think she's been gone for a while now. Duchess Nirma sighed sharply. She had told this woman to stay by the Empress, but now she had no choice but to act. Go check your passes, she ordered. See if anything is missing. And inspect every exit and entry point. I mean everyone, even the ones commoners use. Meanwhile, Angie and Eden continued their journey. I hope it doesn't snow, Eden muttered. That would be a problem. It won't, Angie said. Oh? If you say so, then I suppose it's fine, Eden sighed. Ever since the bandits appeared, Angie's strange instincts had only grown sharper. It was as if she could feel something foreign whispering inside her, and whenever she spoke those words aloud, they turned out to be true. Head west for 1 hour, a voice murmured in her ear. I think we should head west for an hour, she told Eden. He stared at her for a moment, then nodded. Every instinct she'd voiced so far had been right. There was no reason to doubt her now. And just as the voice predicted, after an hour they arrived at a small farming hut. It was winter, so it was empty. In summer, farmers probably used it, but now it was the perfect hidden shelter. The voice had led them straight to a safe place for the night. They lit the fireplace and sat down. Eden glanced at her. Is the smoke not bothering you? No, it's fine. Why do you ask? He shrugged, just trying to make conversation. To pass time. I didn't know you were the type who enjoyed useless small talk, Angie replied. Then tell me your name, he said suddenly. Angie stiffened, then slowly answered. It's Yeonji. Choi Yeonji. Eden continued staring at her, noting how unenthusiastic she sounded even when revealing her real identity. You don't seem very fond of your life there, he remarked. I told you. I didn't exactly have a bright future there, Angie reminded him. Suddenly, he leaned closer. You were right. I'm rich there, he said quietly. So, would you be more motivated to go back if I promised to help you? Angie blinked. Why suddenly? I just thought you'd be more excited about going back, he said. And less reluctant to leave here. And leave the Emperor. Then Eden lifted his hand, gently cupping her face. Choi Yeonji, he called softly. Angie looked at him. Yes? Are you sure you'll be all right? If he dies? Angie froze. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. So, is bothering you? Eden sighed. Isn't it? Angie hesitated. I don't know. But I know it won't be easy for me to cope with his death. She admitted it at last. She had thought that eventually it wouldn't matter, that distance would dull everything, but no. The more she tried not to think about him, the clearer his face resurfaced in her memories. Maybe she did have feelings for him, and yet the freedom she felt now was also undeniably real. Ever since leaving Actilis, even her nightmares had stopped. 8 days after leaving the country of Docino, Angie and Eden trudged through the snow-covered paths. The wind bit at their faces, their breaths turning into white clouds. We're almost there, Eden said, voice strained but firm. Let's keep going. If we slow down now, the Emperor might retreat. But before Angie could respond, that strange voice whispered behind her ear, soft, cold, too close. No. He will think the snow might stop soon. Angie swallowed. Eden, he'll only retreat if things get completely out of control. Eden shot her a sideways look. Are you saying that because you know him that well? No, it's my instinct, Angie said quietly. Eden exhaled. Lately your instincts have been right, though. Angie tried to take another step, but her legs gave out. She stumbled and collapsed into the snow, breath ragged. Are you all right? Eden crouched instantly, grabbing her shoulders. We're almost there. Angie tried to stand, but her body refused. Her limbs shook violently. Eden's expression hardened. She had reached her limit. And yet they couldn't stay here. If the snow grew any heavier, the path would be buried, with no other choice. He lifted her into his arms. What are you doing? Angie gasped, startled. I want to get back home as soon as possible, Eden said simply, pushing forward through the deepening snow. Step by step, the world around them turned white. And then, finally, the silhouette of a temple appeared through the storm. Eden tightened his grip on her and crossed the last stretch. They pushed open the heavy doors. It's Eden, he called out. Your Holiness, I need your help. The Archbishop turned, shock flashing across his face. What are you doing here? And who is this lady? Angie forced herself to stand, her voice trembling as she bowed. I am the Empress of Actilis, she said. I know this is sudden, but I am fleeing from Actilis. Her knees buckled and she sank to the floor. Please, I came to the God of mercy. Grant me shelter and some food. Only then did the Archbishop's eyes widen in recognition. The Empress of Actilis was kneeling before him, pale, shivering, on the verge of collapsing. But as Angie looked up at him, her vision blurred. No matter how hard she tried, she kept seeing a different face. Ragnello's face, her husband's face. Was it because she was scared? Or because she still couldn't push away her feelings for him? Her thoughts tangled, spun, and then dissolved into darkness as she finally lost consciousness. When Angie opened her eyes again, she was lying in a room she had never seen before. Warmth, blankets. A faint light flickered on the wall. The door creaked open. A young woman stepped inside carrying a tray of food. She hurried to Angie's side, worry written all over her face. You're awake. Are you in pain? She asked softly, leaning closer to check her temperature. Angie stared at her, stunned. Even without anyone saying it, she knew exactly who this woman was. Raniello's destined partner, the Saintess of Tunia. This is my room, the woman said gently, offering a reassuring smile. Meanwhile, far away, in the snow-buried mountains near the Samvinia border, the blizzard had turned brutal. The soldiers of Actilus were barely holding on. Staying any longer in this weather was madness. Raniello's jaw tightened, years of analyzing winter patterns, yet this time his predictions had failed. We don't have enough supplies to return the same way, he said, voice low and cold. We'll stop by Tunia on the way. Retreat, for now. Snow whipped around him as he issued the order. Back in Tunia, Angie sat with the Saintess, unable to stop herself from looking at her. Serafina noticed and smiled softly. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I am Serafina, she said gently. Angie hesitated. 3 weeks ago, she was the Empress of Actilus. But what was she now? After a moment of quiet struggle, she finally answered, My name is Angelica. I heard you hiked for 17 days, Serafina said, her tone full of worry. It must have been terribly hard. And the knight who came with you? He's resting in another room. He was exhausted. Then she paused, studying Angie more carefully. If I may ask, I heard you fled from Actilus. Why did you run away? Angie froze. She didn't know how to start. Eden was supposed to handle this part. She forced a small breath. Didn't Eden tell you anything? She asked cautiously. Eden? To me? Serafina blinked in surprise. Angie's heart lurched. Had she said something wrong? But Serafina continued calmly. I did feel something was strange. Eden has despised me for a long time, so for him to suddenly confess his love and get himself banished, it was odd. Her expression softened with a thoughtful sadness. But now that he returned months later with you, it made sense. Perhaps he did it to reach you, and maybe to bring you here. Angie stared at her, stunned at how quickly and how accurately Serafina pieced everything together. I know Eden doesn't love me, Serafina added quietly. Under that sharp gaze, Angie felt pressure becoming unbearable. She decided to tell what was necessary. The Emperor of Actilus, he will arrive here soon. Angie's voice trembled as she turned to her. Panic flickered in her eyes. But you have to kill him. She knew it sounded absurd, asking a Saintess of Mercy to kill someone, but she had no time. Raniello's voice kept echoing through her ears, calling her name, confusion twisting inside her. She pressed forward anyway. Please, only the Saintess of Tunia can do it. And it's also for your own good. For my own good? Serafina asked, baffled. How would killing the Emperor benefit me? Angie couldn't reveal the part about Raniello taking Serafina for himself. She couldn't say that. So she forced herself to speak carefully. It's not just for you. It's for Eden too. Eden? Serafina whispered. What does this have to do with him? Angie inhaled sharply. I found it in a prophetic book. A book that tells the future. Serafina's eyes narrowed. A prophecy book? Where did you find it? You were away during a monster hunt, Angie explained. I found it then. It's in my bag. Right there. But there's one problem. Only I can read it. Serafina listened, then quietly took out the book. Is this it? Yes, Angie nodded. Can you read the title? Serafina shook her head. No, it's completely blank. Angie sighed heavily. I know it sounds ridiculous, like I'm a fraud claiming to see the future in an empty book. But it's real. Eden also knows about this prophecy. At Eden's mention, Serafina's eyes widened. Eden? What does the prophecy say about him? Angie held her breath. According to the prophecy, he will be killed by Raniello. Serafina's face drained of all color. She staggered to her feet in panic. No, it can't be. I'm sorry, but this is... She stammered, unable to finish. It's all right, Angie said softly. I know it's difficult to hear. She continued, her voice quieter. I didn't mind running away, but Eden wanted to face this. So we came here. The agent of Actilus is fated to die at the hands of the Saintess of Tunia. My wish is simply to make sure no one else gets hurt. Serafina's voice shook. Then, according to the prophecy, will you die too? Angie hesitated before answering. Yes, I'm supposed to die first. I know it sounds absurd and impossible to believe, so don't worry, I understand if you doubt me. But unexpectedly, Serafina's reply came quietly, almost trembling. No, I believe you, because it's you, and I'm sorry. Later that night, Angie lay awake, replaying that moment. Serafina believed her, too quickly. And that apology, what did she mean by that? Something about the Saintess felt strangely unsettled, unclear, and Angie couldn't shake the unease growing inside her. The next day, Serafina stood before the people of Tunia, her white robes fluttering in the cold wind. Listen to me, she called out, her voice echoing clearly through the square. Soon the army of Actilus, led by the Emperor, will arrive here. There will be many soldiers. The temple was once saved by the Emperor, so now it is our turn to repay him. We are children of the God of Mercy. Even if we have received nothing, we must help those in need. The people murmured anxiously, uncertain, reluctant. But when the saintess spoke, her words were absolute. One by one, their heads bowed in obedience. From a shadowed corner, Eden watched quietly from behind a stone wall, noting every movement Serafina made. She was already taking action. Soon after, the army finally arrived, led by Raniello himself. The archbishop stood at the gates to welcome him. But Raniello's eyes narrowed the moment he saw his calm expression. "Why do you not seem surprised?" Raniello asked sharply. The archbishop hesitated, then bowed deeply. We already heard of your arrival in advance, your majesty." From the saintess. A faint spark of amusement flickered across Raniello's face. "Oh? That is interesting," he murmured as he walked past. Inside the prayer room, Angie sat alone. She could hear the roar of soldiers outside, the unmistakable sign of Raniello's arrival. Serafina had insisted she stay here. "No one comes to the prayer room except me," she had said. "It is the safest place." But Angie's stomach twisted with unease. 3 days, 3 long days she had been hidden here, waiting for Raniello to leave. Yet he was still here, according to the novel, Angie thought. By now, Serafina and Raniello's destined encounter should have already happened. So why had nothing begun? Why was he still here? Her anxiety only grew heavier. Footsteps approached, and Angie immediately looked up with relief, thinking Serafina had finally returned. But it wasn't her, it was Eden. He shut the door quietly behind him. "Keep your voice down. Where is Serafina?" he demanded. Angie blinked, startled. "She left me here 3 days ago. And she hasn't come once." Eden clenched his jaw. "Not even once? Then where the hell is she?" He turned to leave. "I'll check elsewhere." "Wait," Angie grabbed his arm. "What's happening outside? Why is he still here?" Eden stopped, inhaling sharply, his frustration clear. Then he turned back to her, gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me. The story has changed. Serafina never met him." Angie's eyes widened. That wasn't supposed to happen. In the original novel, Serafina should have welcomed Raniello personally. Instead, Raniello had been welcomed by the archbishop. It meant only one thing. Serafina was avoiding him. "So we need to change our plan," Eden continued. "We have to reach the old sanctuary before Serafina kills him." "What? Why so suddenly?" Angie asked, panic rising in her voice. "There are almost 10,000 soldiers with the Emperor," Eden said, lowering his voice. "I failed to consider that. If Serafina kills him now, the army will lose its commander and go berserk. They'll destroy this place, so we must leave before anything goes wrong." He added firmly, "Focus on 2 things right now, the blood of Actilus and the sword of Tunia. Eden, this is too sudden." Before she could finish, Eden froze. He had heard something. A voice behind them. Eden pushed Angie back into the alcove of the room and whispered, "Stay quiet." The footsteps grew louder, steady, familiar. Then a voice she knew too well echoed through the chamber. What was that? Was I imagining things? A low breath. I heard my wife's voice? Raniello stepped into the prayer room. Angie backed away, clamping her hand over her mouth so not even a breath escaped. Eden turned calmly toward Raniello, who had just stepped inside. "Did the Empress come with you as well?" Eden asked. "No," Raniello replied. "She wasn't feeling well, so she went to rest in the countryside." Eden let out a deliberate sigh. "Then she can't be here." Raniello narrowed his eyes. "Then who are you talking to?" "The Saintess," Eden answered smoothly. "I apologize, Your Majesty, but no outsiders are allowed in the prayer room. If you are lost, I can show you the way out." Raniello looked around the dim room once more, gaze lingering on the shadows as if sensing something. Then he nodded. Eden let him out, but Raniello's head kept turning back, his eyes scanning the space, like he could feel his wife's presence even if he couldn't see her. Inside the alcove, Angie exhaled only when their footsteps vanished. Her knees weakened with relief. If Eden hadn't acted fast, she would have been caught. But now, what should she do? Outside the prayer room, a sharp crack echoed. A hard slap landed across Eden's cheek as a superior knight berated him. "How dare you enter the prayer room after being banished for it?" Eden stood silent, accepting the punishment. He was placed on probation instantly. From above the corridor, unseen, Serafina watched everything unfold. Neither of the 2 men sensed her presence. Her thoughts raced. Why did he come to the prayer room? Was he searching for me, or for Angelica? The latter felt more painful. But the former made more sense. Like Angelica, Eden seemed to need something from her. Still, his recklessness could have exposed her. Did he even consider that? Of course not. If he had, he wouldn't have pretended to love her just to be exiled. He was cold. And now she understood. Her one-sided affection would never be returned. Perhaps this was her punishment. Elsewhere, Raniello stood atop the temple steps, gazing at the distant mountains. The faint sunlight melted. Patches of snow, signaling a shift in the weather. Perhaps it's time to leave this place, he thought. Pathetic, lifeless, and he wanted to return to his wife as soon as possible. Then, Agent of Actilus. Raniello turned at the voice of a woman calling out to him. He smirked. Well, look who it is, the Saintess of Tunia. And just like that, the long-foretold moment arrived. The Saintess of Tunia finally stood face-to-face with the Agent of Actilus. Inside, Angie grew more anxious with every passing hour. She hadn't seen Serafina. She hadn't seen Eden. She didn't know whether Serafina had finally met Raniello, or if something had gone wrong. Eden had insisted Serafina was avoiding the Emperor. But what if they never met? Her head throbbed. She knew she was selfish. She had hidden the truth from Serafina deliberately. But she was certain of one thing: once they met, Raniello's obsession would ignite. He would try to take Serafina with him, and then Serafina would have no choice but to kill him once they reached Actilis. That was the plan. That was the only way to survive. So why hadn't Eden come to see her? Why was she still trapped, here, waiting? A sudden loud noise burst from outside. Angie hurried to the window. Her eyes widened. The Actilis army, who had camped here for days, was leaving. Her heart raced. Did that mean Serafina had met Raniello? Did he take her away? If yes, then Angie's path was safe again. She needed to find Eden immediately. She rushed outside and ran toward the temple chamber. The priests stood there, but their faces were dark and gloomy. Angie exhaled in disbelief. They looked devastated. That could only mean one thing, right? Serafina must have been taken. Of course they'd look miserable if their saintess had left with the Emperor. For the first time, Angie felt relief. Ugly, selfish relief. But what else could she do when her life was on the line? "Thank you for hiding me here," she said, hurried. "Now, where is Eden? I need to ask him something." Silence. Not a single priest answered. Angie's heart began to pound harder. "Why aren't you saying anything?" Footsteps echoed behind her. Angie froze. Serafina stood there, her saintess silk cloak, her gentle expression, and she was still in Tunia. Angie felt her face drain of all color. "Why are you here? You didn't meet Raniello? But didn't I tell you Eden will die if you don't?" Her voice cracked under panic. Serafina stepped closer. "You are mistaken, Empress. I did meet him, but nothing happened. Nothing happened." Angie's mind spun. This was wrong. This was not the story. The author had said, explicitly, the agent of Actilis will always be obsessed with the Saintess of Tunia. That fact would never change. So why? Why was this happening? Why was the one unchangeable fact changing? She felt her world tilting. Serafina tried to soothe her. There were too many soldiers. "If I attacked him recklessly, who knows what would have happened? So please calm down." But Angie's panic only grew sharper. She turned to the priests, voice trembling. "Is it true? Did she really meet him? Really? Really?" The more she asked, the more desperate her voice became. If she had known this, if she had known things would deviate this far, she would never have taken the risk to escape. She would never have betrayed Raniello. And now, when he returned, when he learned what she had done, he would be furious. Furious beyond forgiveness. Angie trembled, suffocating on her own terror. Serafina approached gently. "Please calm down. There must be another way." "Is there?" Angie shouted, startling her. Was there any other way now? She staggered to her feet. "I need Eden. He's the one who told me to come here. Where is he?" Again, silence. "Where is Eden? Where is he?" She kept asking until her voice sounded unhinged. Finally, the Archbishop stepped forward, stern. "Enough of this behavior. We can't allow it to continue." He turned. "Follow me. I will show you where Eden is." Inside the dim room, Eden, still on probation for entering the prayer room earlier, jerked upright when Angie rushed in, pale and trembling. "Eden, this is bad," she cried, her voice breaking. "What happened?" he asked quickly. "The Emperor... He didn't take Serafina with him. The story changed." Angie sobbed. Eden blinked, confused. "What do you mean? She didn't meet him?" "No. She met him," Angie said, breathless. "But everything changed. Stop crying." Eden tried to steady her. "We missed our chance this time, but this has nothing to do with a missed chance." Angie suddenly screamed. "Don't you get it? He's not obsessed with Serafina. And now that he finds out I ran away, he'll hunt me down and kill me. What do I do? Eden, he's going to kill me." Her words spiraled into panicked mumbling. She had depended on Eden, but now reality hit her. Eden prioritizes himself. He always had. And she wasn't any different, but she couldn't rely on him anymore. She turned abruptly and tried to leave. Eden grabbed her wrist. "Where are you going?" "I'm going back. I have to return," she cried. Eden sighed. "Can you run faster than the Actilis army?" She froze. "Then what do you suggest?" she demanded. "This doesn't concern you," she continued, voice shaking. "But my situation is different now. The story has changed. You can find another way. And if I become a burden, you might abandon me. So I need to find a way too. If I don't do anything, I'll be caught and die a painful death." Eden fell silent at her accusation. "Angelica, But before he could finish, Serafina entered the room. "Angelica," she said softly, "I don't understand everything, but you said it took you 17 days to reach here, right?" She stepped forward and gently wiped Angie's tears. "Then for him to return, it will take more than a month. You still have time, more than a month, to find a solution." Serafina spoke with the warmth of an older sister. Then she embraced Angie, patting her back. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "I didn't." No, a disruption in your plan would cause you such fear. Angie felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She'd been selfish, deceptive, yet Serafina comforted her. Even though Angie had hidden the truth from her, Serafina forgave them both. Still, Angie sensed she was holding back. She spoke calmly, but deep inside she was clearly fighting her own battle. Angelica, Serafina tried to say something, but her courage failed. She hurried out of the room. Angie tried to follow, but Eden caught her wrist again. Let her think for a while, he said quietly. We need to come up with a plan too. And I know how to take responsibility for my actions. Then he looked directly into her eyes. And I have no intention of watching you die. Meanwhile, the Actilus army trudged home, defeated and exhausted, morale sinking with every step. Raniello wondered if he should have stayed longer. But the troops were suffering from frostbite and fatigue. Any delay would have killed more soldiers. As he marched, a chaotic voice that thrilled at violence finally fell silent. There was no joy in this campaign, no exhilaration, just emptiness. But then, her face flickered in his mind. Suddenly, he could hear her voice as if she were beside him. A smile tugged at his lips. Without hesitation, Raniello veered away from the army. He headed straight toward Docio, the countryside retreat where Angie had gone for her vacation. His heart quickened with anticipation. She would be shocked to see him return so early, but her surprise would only last a moment. Then she would listen to all his complaints, how displeased he was that he couldn't go to war, how bored he had been without her. And then, he would entertain himself with his empress, hear her say she loved him again and again, until he tired of it, though he doubted he would ever truly get tired of her. When Raniello arrived in the country of Docino, he stepped forward with a bright smile, already imagining the moment he would see Angie again. But that smile, slowly, painfully faded, as he heard the trembling words of Countess Docino. Your Majesty, the Empress is missing. Raniello blinked, unable to process it. What did you say? Before anyone could answer, soldiers dragged forward two women, Suzanne and Sylvia. We captured them. They were with the Empress when she vanished. Countess Docino hurried to explain, her voice shaking. We arrested her maids first. They were the last to see her before she went missing. Missing? Raniello repeated, as if the word itself was foreign. The Empress is missing? The air around him chilled, his eyes darkened, dangerous. Countess Docino flinched. She recognized the look of a man moments away from violence. She regretted not keeping an eye on the Empress, and even Duchess Nirma didn't come to support her. She just helped to catch maids. Raniello seized Count Docino by the collar. Did someone abduct her? His voice was a thunderclap. Did you fail to protect her? No one would dare abduct the Empress, the Count whispered, trembling. A sharp voice cut through the panic. Nonsense. Sylvia lifted her chin, meeting Raniello's deadly gaze without flinching. It wasn't an abduction, she said coldly. The Empress chose to run away on her own. Raniello stared at her, eyes burning. You have a death wish, he said softly, a threat more terrifying than shouting. She loves me. Why would she run? Sylvia laughed, a cruel, broken laugh. Isn't it ironic? She sneered. The man who made so many people miserable is now miserable himself, because of a woman named Angelica Anro Actilus. She paused. But she's not an Actilus anymore, is she? Didn't you know? Ranello's jaw tightened. In a flash, his sword was at her face. Shut your mouth. But Sylvia only smiled wider, a wild, hopeless smile. No one abducted her. She ran because you're despicable. His hand trembled. For a heartbeat, his eyes widened. The winter hunt, he whispered. Sylvia furrowed her brows. What? Raniello's expression shifted, unsettling, eerie. A smile crept onto his lips, but it wasn't the smile of a sane man. This is the winter hunt, he murmured. My wife must have wanted a larger hunting ground. This is simply a game she prepared. Gasps spread through the hall. His trust, his delusion, was frightening. Isn't that right? He continued softly. Why else would she leave her precious maid behind and run? She certainly piqued my interest. The Empress loves me, Sylvia scoffed. Love? She repeated. She never loved you. She spent every moment planning how to escape from you. This time, her words hit him like a blade. Raniello froze. Sylvia stepped closer, voice sharp as ice. What now? Going to kill me? Do it. Then your wife will fear you even more. Kill me. And when you find her, tell her you punished her maid in her place. His fingers loosened on the sword. For the first time, he hesitated. Deep inside, something shifted, slowly. He started piecing together every moment he had brushed aside. Every flinch, every trembling breath, every forced smile. She had feared him. She had always feared him. The sword slipped from his hand and clattered to the ground. Sylvia's words echoed like a curse. But they were only confirming what he already knew. He was someone to fear, and fear drove her away. But he would not allow fear to take her from him. He had never once let go of what he wanted in his life, and he wouldn't start now. Slowly, he lowered himself to the ground, a wild determination burning in his eyes. It's simple, he whispered. I'll show her there is no need to fear. Sylvia and Suzanne stared at him in horror. Has he finally lost it? Sylvia whispered, but Raniello only smiled, bright, feverish, utterly unhinged. I'll go after her, he said. I'll bring her back, and I will forgive her. And because rumors could destroy Angie's name, he changed the story with a single command. He declared this event a winter hunt that the Empress had specially prepared for. Her emperor, Sylvia, watched him with disgust. Truly insane, she thought. Because only a madman would smile so sweetly. While planning to chase down the woman who ran for her life, a few days passed in suffocating silence. Angie sat alone in her small room, hands clasped together so tightly her knuckles had turned white. She hadn't eaten properly. She hadn't slept. Every hour felt like a countdown to the moment Ranello would appear, to drag her back, to punish her, to end her. By now he surely knew she had run away. Any moment. He could come. Her heart throbbed painfully. Why did the original story change? Why did Serafina's tragic fate shift onto her instead? But she couldn't blame Serafina, not even for a moment. It was her fault. She had hidden the truth. She had tried to shift the fate onto Serafina. Yet Serafina still forgave her, forgave both her and Eden, and even convinced the Archbishop to lift Eden's punishment. Angie wasn't welcomed warmly, but the temple still accepted her, because they served the god of mercy. Still, mercy didn't diminish the terror in her heart. As she spiraled deeper into worry, a knock sounded at the door. Serafina entered, with Eden behind her, finally free from his probation. Oddly, Eden seemed more concerned about her than ever before. His eyes flickered to her face repeatedly, as if checking she was really still there. They sat together. An uneasy trio. Eden began quietly. The Emperor won't bring an army here. His soldiers must be exhausted. Even he must be tired. And remember, we have the Holy Knights. Angie stared at him. Was he planning to fight Raniello? Too optimistic. Too reckless. Raniello was blessed by Actilla, god of slaughter. Even alone, he was a force no human army could confront. Eden must have known that, so maybe he was only trying to reassure her. Still, he asked gently, I'm planning to convince the Holy Knights to prepare for battle, but if you don't want that, there was no peaceful way to talk with Raniello anymore. No negotiation, no pleading. Angie swallowed hard and nodded. Later, Serafina and Angie went to the prayer room to pray, asking the god of mercy for a path, for safety, for something, anything. As Serafina prayed earnestly beside her, Angie found herself drifting, wondering why she was here, why she kept feeling like something was wrong, something was missing. When suddenly, Serafina turned toward her in the dream and grabbed her by the neck. I'm on my way. Just wait for me, Angie. Angie's eyes flew open with a scream caught in her throat. Those weren't Serafina's words. That was him. Serafina, who had been sleeping next to her, bolted up. Angelica, are you all right? But Angie couldn't answer. Her mind was spinning, cold dread crawling through her veins. She stumbled out of bed and rushed to the prayer room. Serafina hurried after her. No, Angie whispered again and again, clutching her head. What are you talking about? Serafina asked, breathless and confused. Angie turned sharply, eyes wide. It's not you, she said. You're not the sword of Tunia. Serafina froze. Angie didn't know how she knew, only that something inside her screamed the truth. I don't know who it is, she whispered, voice trembling, but it's not you. Then suddenly, a voice, cold, ancient, ominous, echoed inside her skull. The sword's plan will fail. Angie gasped as pain ripped through her head, sharp and blinding. She clutched her temples, nearly collapsing. She didn't know what the sword's plan was. She didn't know who the sword even was, but the voice kept echoing, louder and louder, until it felt like her skull would crack. On the other side of the land, Raniello strode toward Tunia, step after step, eyes fixed on the horizon, while that voice echoed in his mind again and again. Raniello, don't go. Listen to me. It's a trap. The warning grew sharper, more desperate each time. But Raniello didn't slow, didn't hesitate, didn't even blink. He was on his way to his wife. Nothing, not God, not fate, not warnings, could make him stop. A few days earlier, Raniello stood with his head resting lightly against the maid's shoulder, listening to her trembling breath. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but every word carried razor edges. Why didn't she take you with her? He asked softly. You went south on purpose, so the search party would follow you. Cezanne froze. That means, Raniello continued, his lips curling, my wife must have gone north, right? Cezanne trembled like a lamb cornered by a hungry beast. But Raniello... He laughed, a hollow, maddened laugh. It was too easy for him to sense lies. He could hear them in breathing, feel them in the air itself. And yet, his wife fooled him. The realization twisted inside him. She clung to him. She smiled at him. She whispered love to him, and not once had she shown a hint of reluctance. So how could she not love him? Anger burned through his chest like wildfire. His hand shot out, fingers closing around Cezanne's neck from behind. The maid gasped, feet lifting off the ground as he growled, Your master abandoned you, betrayed you. So why? His grip tightened. Why are you still so stubborn? What's the point? Cezanne smiled, tears spilling, but her voice didn't break. She is my master for life, she said, even though she changed long ago. I will still be on her side. I will always believe her. Her trustworthiness and my loyalty will never change. Raniello scoffed, a bitter noise. Trustworthiness. Only fools trusted the words of liars. Would he forgive Angie? Yes. Would he hold her? Certainly. But trust her again? That he did not know. Yet this maid, this fragile, terrified maid, would accept Angie no matter what. Was that love? Something deeper? For the first time in his life, Raniello felt something strange, like he'd been defeated. A small, pitiful maid defeated him. His fingers tightened unconsciously. Perhaps he should kill her. Perhaps harass her to the point she betrays Angie. Perhaps Sylvia's words cut through his mind like ice. Won't your wife fear you even more if you kill her maids? His hand immediately unclenched. Cézanne collapsed, coughing for breath. He couldn't kill her. Not because he lacked cruelty, but because Angie would fear him more, and he couldn't bear that. Later, as he sat on the sofa, Countess Docino rushed in, out of breath. As you commanded, she said, we investigated the list of travelers who passed through the northern gate a month ago. Raniello lifted his gaze slowly. A married couple of unknown origin went through, she finished. Raniello's eyes sharpened. Married couple, north, servant. The pieces snapped together, and suddenly he remembered that faint voice he'd heard at the Temple of Tunia. His Angie's voice. The Holy Knight had said she wasn't there. Everyone had said she wasn't there. They all lied. All of them. Prepare a horse, Raniello ordered quietly. Countess Docino rushed out to obey. Raniello stayed seated for a moment, staring at nothing. A married couple. They dared to call themselves that? A hysterical, hollow laugh left his lips. How ridiculous, he whispered. How absurd that anyone would call Angie someone else's wife. Because she wasn't. She was his. And he was going to retrieve what belonged to him with his own hands. At Tunia, Eden requested the Archbishop's permission to let the Holy Knights fight when Raniello arrived. But the Archbishop only sighed heavily, seeing how much the once innocent boy had changed. Besides, how could he allow Holy Knights to raise a sword against the Emperor, the very man who helped them during the monster hunt? But Eden didn't back down. The Emperor will be in a foul mood when he arrives, he argued. He'll question us for hiding the Empress. The Archbishop answered with a sharp question of his own. How can you say that when you are the one who brought her here? Eden fell silent. Cha Suyon had always been calm, cold even, different reasoning from Raniello, but the same dismissive attitude toward people, except for Angelica. Maybe because she was from the same world. Maybe because she understood him more than anyone else could. So naturally, if he had to choose between Angelica and the people of Tunia, he would choose her. Not for any noble reason, simply because she was the only person he could connect with. Are you planning to betray the Empress? Eden asked quietly. If you wanted to betray her, you should have done it long ago. To the Archbishop, it didn't matter if Eden cared for her or not. In his eyes, Angelica Enro Actilis was a simple yet selfish person. Someone who ignored justice out of fear for her own safety. Someone who used others as shields, yet still pitied misfortune when she saw it. He didn't know what her true goal was, but their saintess had nearly become a sacrifice because of her. Eden, the Archbishop said, the day the Actilis army left, she behaved strangely. You can't deny that. Eden stared at him. So that's why you want to betray her? The Archbishop let out another sigh. The saintess forgave her. But I've made up my mind. I won't be persuaded no matter what you say. And the Holy Knights will not defend the Empress. Eden's hands clenched. May I know why? The Archbishop replied calmly. Because you came up with the plan to use the Holy Knights, and because our knights are no match for the Emperor. Even if all attacked him at once, he would win, no matter how many stand against him. Eden scoffed. Enough excuses. You already decided you wouldn't listen to any plan I suggested. Or is this what the saintess told you to do? The Archbishop looked at him for a long moment before saying gently but firmly, your plan will fail in the end. Because that was God's will. Eden gritted his teeth. So that was the only reason? How annoying. Later, Eden sat with Angie, burying his head in his palms. He doesn't listen. No matter what I say, just because it's my plan. Eden rambled. Desperately. Eden, you need to calm down. Angie tried to soothe him. But Eden's anger only surged. He stood up sharply. Do you know what he said? He burst out. He said he'll disagree with me no matter what I come up with. And do you know why? Because that's what Serafina told him. Angie's brows narrowed. Serafina? Eden let out a long, exhausted sigh. A prophecy was received from God. It said my plan would fail, so he was told to oppose anything I suggested. It's ridiculous. They won't cooperate at all. Angie looked at him quietly. He truly was furious. No matter what he did, the outcome was already decided. For someone as self-confident as him, that must be unbearable. As she watched him, her mind replayed the words she heard before. No matter what he did, his plan will fail. She had heard something similar earlier. The sword's plan will fail. Her eyes widened. Eden, she said slowly, you are the sword of Tunia. I heard earlier that the sword's plan will fail, so that must be you. Eden froze, listening. Her instincts had been strangely accurate lately, and it aligned perfectly with what the Archbishop had said. Seeing him helpless, Angie stood up. Eden, we should do this together, the two of us. Eden looked at her puzzled, but Angie, determined, continued. I'll lure him in. We have to make Actilla bleed and go to the ancient sanctuary to open the door together, so we can return to our world. The journey so long finally came to an end as Raniello reached the Temple of Tunya. As he ascended the steps, the archbishop and the priests stood waiting, already aware the emperor had arrived. The man with eyes dark as storm clouds stopped before them. Where is my wife? He asked. His chilling voice made the priests tremble. The archbishop gulped. The empress has left. When? Raniello asked. A few hours ago. Where is she headed? To the north, the archbishop answered calmly. All right then. Raniello lifted his hand. Give me the Saintess. The priests' faces paled. But didn't we just tell you where the empress headed? They said, trembling. Just shut up and do what I said, Raniello replied, dangerously quiet. This is the price for deceiving me. He stepped forward, his voice icy enough to freeze the air. You hid what is most precious to me. So I will take what is most precious to you. Inside the prayer room, Serafina stood before the goddess when the door suddenly opened. Raniello stepped in. Without a second's hesitation, he seized her wrist, ready to drag her away. The archbishop and priests dropped to their knees, begging him to release the Saintess. But Raniello's sharp voice cut through the room like a blade. If I can't find my Angie, if any harm has come to her, this woman will not be safe either. A clear threat. Everyone trembled, powerless to protect their Saintess. Yet Serafina only looked over her shoulder at them, a silent message in her eyes. Do not fear for me. I am not the one you think I am. Raniello dragged her out without stopping once. She begged him to slow down, but he didn't hear her. The voice that had warned him of a trap earlier now surged violently in his mind, pushing him, urging him. But Raniello cared about only one thing, his Angie. He would bring his wife back. He would make sure she never ran away again. When they reached the old sanctuary, Angie stood there, bow in hand. Raniello finally saw her face, and a smile spread across his lips. It's been a while, my empress. But Angie lifted her bow, aiming straight at him. Raniello didn't falter. You prepared all this for me, I'm so glad. Behind him, Serafina stood silently, witnessing everything. Raniello picked up an arrow of his own and raised his bow toward Angie. If this is the entertainment you prepared, he said calmly, then I'll play along. Now. Let's finish this. Husband and wife stood across from each other, arrows drawn. Angie trembled as she watched him. After half a year with him, she could read him well enough. He looked calm. But inside he was anything but calm. She had acted brave in front of Eden. But now? Now she was terrified. A part of her wanted to drop everything, run to him, hug him, apologize, tell him she loved him, let him kiss her, ask him to take her back home. But it was too late for that. She had come too far. There was no turning back. Her legs shook, tears gathered, threatening to spill. But she kept staring only at him. She needed all his senses fixed on her so that he wouldn't notice anything else. He must not notice Eden approaching from behind. Eden raised his sword and struck as planned. Raniello sensed something and turned, but too late. The arrow he'd aimed at Angie flew from his fingers. Eden's blade pierced the side of Raniello's neck. Blood sprayed across the stone. Serafina covered her mouth, horrified. Raniello collapsed, crimson pouring from the wound. Angie fell too, the arrow buried in her foot. She sat trembling, gasping at the sharp pain. She grabbed the shaft with trembling fingers, tried to pull it out, but it snapped in two. Her mind spun. What happened to him? Is he alive? Eden stepped forward, clutching his stabbed arm. Angelica, we have to get to the door. Right now, he urged, pulling her up as she limped. Just bear it a little longer. Once we're back in our world, the pain of these bodies will disappear. Angie looked back one last time. The man lying on the stone floor lifted his gaze toward her, eyes sharp, burning. But then his face vanished from sight as they hurried inside the sanctuary. As they stepped inside, memories of everything that had happened rushed through Eden's mind. It's over, he murmured. I stabbed him in the neck. He should be dead now. Angie looked at him. Raniello was dead. A swirl of emotions stormed through her. Relief that she could return home. Joy that she no longer needed to fear him. Yet beneath that, something strange pressed against her chest. A faint sadness she refused to acknowledge. Inside the library, Eden pointed toward the stone door, but Angie still couldn't see it. It felt strange, but Eden saw it clearly. He strode forward and grabbed the knob, pushing, pulling, nothing. The door didn't move. Watching him struggle, Angie asked, Eden, what's wrong? The door. It won't open, he said, still trying. Why? The agent of Ectilus bled, and I'm the sword of Tunya, like you said. So why won't it open? He couldn't understand. The prophecy. The archbishop's words. Your plan will fail. No matter how hard he tried, it was destined to fail. It was God's will. Desperate, he kicked the door, but nothing happened. Angie stared at him. Did he really meet all the conditions? Maybe not. Eden. He's not dead, she whispered. The moment the words left her mouth, the door opened. A pair of sharp, chilling eyes appeared through the gap. Eden and Angie spun around. A man stepped inside, dragging his sword behind him across the floor. Raniello. A terrifying sight. Why isn't he dead yet? Eden whispered, stepping in front of Angie. Raniello lifted his sword, his voice cold. My dear Angie, the hunt is over. I admit, your attempt was commendable, but this ends here. Behind him, Serafina entered the library as well. Angie froze. She remembered the scene from the original novel, Eden dying at Raniello's feet, Serafina crying as she held his head. Without thinking, Angie rushed forward and stood in front of Eden, raising her hand as if to shield him. Don't, she cried. Please don't kill him. She didn't even know what she was doing. There was no time to think. Please, stop. Raniello stared at her. Are you afraid something will happen to him? He asked quietly. But I'm the one who is badly injured right now. He tapped the wound on his neck. He did this to me, and yet, you're still afraid of me? His voice, still Raniello Actilus, the emperor everyone feared. But beneath it, a raw pain trembled. Then, before their eyes, the wound on his neck closed, healed. Angie stared at him, not even surprised anymore. Had she lost her mind to think someone like him could ever be killed? Raniello stepped forward and shoved Angie aside, lunging straight for the man behind her. In the next moment, he attacked Eden, striking his face over and over until Eden finally lost consciousness. Angie dragged herself across the floor, grabbing Raniello's feet with trembling hands, begging him to stop. Please, I was wrong. Please stop, she pleaded. Raniello looked back at her, expression dark and hurt. You're worried for him, he said quietly. You don't want him to die? His eyes, always sharp, always merciless, now trembled as if they held betrayal. He grabbed her hand and pressed it against his wounded neck. Look, Angie, I'm hurt too, he murmured. Angie's eyes widened with fear. Let me go, she whispered, choking on panic. But the man continued, pressing her hand harder against his skin. Look, he hurt me. I'm in pain too. Yet you're still afraid of me. The emperor, feared by everyone, stood there desperate for his wife's attention, his voice breaking. He pulled her by the waist, holding her close. Tell me, Angie. His voice trembled. Am I that scary? Angie's whole body shook. She couldn't answer. Her gaze drifted toward Eden lying motionless on the floor, his chest barely moving. He was still alive, but without treatment he might die. After coming all this way, are they both going to die like this? Angie's mind spun, until she spotted Serafina standing behind a pillar. Yes, Serafina, the saintess, perhaps even the true sword of Tunia. In the original story, she alone was granted divine power. Angie regretted everything, her foolishness, her hesitation. Instead of running away when she had the chance, she had done something stupid. Now there was only one thing left. She looked up at the man before her, tears streaming. Congratulations, she whispered. You won. Her voice was empty, drained of all strength. Please, kill me. Raniello stared at her, then slowly stood up and walked to where his sword fell on the floor. As he bent to pick it up, Angie shut her eyes tightly. So, this was it. Just like the original story. Her final day, killed by Raniello. But the pain never came. Instead, the man lifted her into his arms. Her injured leg throbbed sharply, and she kept asking where he was taking her, what he was doing. But Raniello never answered. Her thoughts spiraled. Will he imprison me? Will he watch me die slowly, the same way he did to Serafina in the original novel? As he passed the pillar where Serafina hid, Angie hoped, desperately, stupidly, that the saintess might strike him down. But Serafina did nothing. Instead, she ran to Eden, collapsing onto the floor beside him. She shook him, calling his name again and again, tears dropping onto his limp form. You could have just left him alive, she cried, voice trembling as she cradled Eden's head. Angie, hearing Serafina's words, froze. What does that mean? It sounded as if Serafina had known this would happen, as if she had known Eden would be attacked from the very beginning. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this and want to be part of our growing community, hit join to support the channel. Take care and see you soon.